Tonight, the path unfolds slowly through the stages of learning that shape a wizard's life, not as a list of lessons or subjects, but as a quiet progression marked by time, expectation, and understanding. Magic begins without control, guided only by emotion and instinct, and over the years it becomes something measured, deliberate, and bound by choice. Each stage carries its own rhythm, its own limits, and its own quiet responsibilities. As one level gives way to the next, knowledge deepens, but so does consequence. Settle in and allow each stage to reveal itself, one level at a time. Magic does not begin with instruction. It begins in moments that pass quickly, often unnoticed at first, and then remembered later with greater meaning. In the wizarding world, the earliest stage of education is not formal, and it is not structured. It exists in the space between instinct and awareness, when a child begins to influence the world around them without understanding how or why. These first signs are rarely controlled. They emerge in response to emotion, shaped by fear, excitement, or frustration, and they leave behind small changes that do not follow ordinary explanation. A toy may shift across the floor without being touched. A fall that should result in injury instead ends without harm. Objects may bend, break, or move in ways that cannot be repeated when asked. These moments are inconsistent, unpredictable, and often brief. For the child, they are not lessons. They are simply part of experience. There is no sense of ability yet, only reaction. Magic at this stage behaves as an extension of feeling rather than thought, and it fades as quickly as it appears. For families familiar with magic, these signs are expected. They are observed quietly, sometimes with a sense of recognition, sometimes with caution. The presence of accidental magic confirms what was already assumed. A child belongs to the same world as their parents, and the path ahead, though still distant, begins to take shape. There is no immediate attempt to teach or control what is happening. Instead, there is patience, the understanding that control cannot exist without time, and that early interference may do more harm than good. In households without prior knowledge of magic, these moments are different. They are confusing, sometimes alarming, and often misunderstood. A child may be blamed for things they cannot explain. Strange occurrences may be dismissed or treated as coincidence. The absence of context creates uncertainty, and the lack of explanation allows fear to grow where understanding has not yet formed. In these cases, the first stage of magical education is marked not by recognition, but by isolation. Regardless of the environment, the nature of magic remains the same. It responds to emotion more readily than intention. A moment of anger may result in sudden force, while fear may trigger defensive reactions that the child cannot control. There is no pattern that can be followed, no rule that can be applied. The magic does not belong to the child yet. It exists around them, moving through them, but not guided by them. Over time, these incidents become more noticeable. Patterns begin to form, though they are not consistent enough to be relied upon. A child may begin to sense that something is different, even if they cannot define it. There may be a growing awareness that certain feelings lead to certain outcomes, but the connection remains unclear. Attempts to repeat these moments usually fail. The lack of control reinforces the idea that whatever is happening exists beyond conscious effort. During this period, the role of adults becomes more important, though still indirect. In magical households, there is an effort to maintain stability. Emotional extremes are often managed carefully, not through strict discipline, but through routine and calm. The goal is not to suppress magic, but to prevent it from becoming disruptive. Small adjustments are made to the environment. Objects that may react unpredictably are kept out of reach. Situations that could trigger strong emotional responses are handled with care. At the same time, there is an awareness beyond the household. The presence of magic in underage individuals does not go entirely unnoticed by the wider wizarding world. Though the child remains unaware, traces of magical activity are observed and recorded. This monitoring is not intrusive, but it ensures that the boundary between magical and non-magical worlds is maintained. Accidental magic, while accepted within certain limits, is still subject to oversight, even at this early stage. The concept of secrecy begins here, though it is not yet explained to the child. In wizarding families, it is understood without being spoken directly. Magic is something that belongs within certain spaces and must remain hidden outside of them. Children are guided away from using magic in public, even if they do not yet understand what using it means. The expectation is established before the reasoning behind it is fully introduced. As the years pass, the child's relationship with magic remains distant. It is present, but not accessible. Moments of accidental magic may continue, but they do not become more controlled. Instead, they serve as reminders of what exists beneath the surface. The child learns, slowly and without formal instruction, that something within them is different. This awareness grows quietly, shaped by observation rather than explanation. There is no formal beginning to education at this level, and there is no clear transition out of it. It fades gradually as the child approaches an age where structure becomes possible. The uncontrolled nature of early magic does not disappear, but it becomes less frequent as emotional responses begin to stabilize. What once appeared without warning begins to recede, leaving behind only the understanding that it will return in a different form. This first stage is not defined by learning in the traditional sense. There are no lessons, no rules, and no expectations placed directly on the child. Yet it forms the foundation of everything that follows. It establishes the presence of magic, introduces its connection to emotion, and sets the conditions under which it will later be shaped and controlled. It is quiet, often overlooked, and easily forgotten, but it remains essential. In time, the child moves beyond this stage, not through achievement, but through readiness. The next level approaches with greater clarity, bringing structure where there was none, an explanation where there was uncertainty. But the memory of this early phase remains, even if it is not fully understood. It is the beginning of a process that will continue for years, guided not by instinct alone, but by knowledge, discipline, and choice. Learning at this stage does not arrive through formal instruction, but through quiet repetition and observation within the home. The child has already begun to recognize that something exists beneath ordinary experience. What follows is not a structured education, but a gradual shaping of behavior, guided by those who understand what the child cannot yet define. In magical households, daily life provides the first examples. Simple spells are performed not as demonstrations, but as routine. Objects are cleaned without touch. Meals are prepared with quiet efficiency, and small inconveniences are removed with practiced gestures. The child watches these actions without fully understanding the mechanics behind them. There is no expectation that they will replicate what they see. Instead, the purpose is familiarity. Magic becomes part of the environment, something present but not yet accessible. Questions are often asked, though the answers remain incomplete. A parent may explain that magic requires focus, intention, and control, but these concepts remain abstract. The child cannot yet translate observation into action. Attempts to imitate wand movements or spoken words usually produce nothing. This absence of response reinforces the idea that magic is not something that can be summoned at will. It must wait for a later stage, when the necessary discipline has been developed. There is also an early introduction to restraint. Even without formal rules, boundaries are established. A child is discouraged from drawing attention to unusual occurrences, particularly outside the home. This guidance is not always explained in detail. It is presented as expectation rather than instruction. Over time, the child begins to understand that certain behaviors are acceptable in private but not in public, even if the reason remains unclear. In homes where magic is unfamiliar, the process takes a different form. Without guidance, the child learns through reaction. Accidental events are met with confusion or concern, and there is little effort to interpret them correctly. The absence of explanation creates distance between the child and their own experiences. Magic becomes something hidden, not because of deliberate secrecy, but because it cannot be understood. The child learns to suppress discussion of these events, sensing that they do not fit within ordinary explanation. Within magical households, there is often a careful balance between allowing natural development and preventing disruption. Strong emotional responses are managed with quiet intervention. A moment of anger may be redirected before it escalates into something unpredictable. A moment of fear may be calmed before it triggers a defensive reaction. These interventions are subtle, often unnoticed by the child, but they shape the environment in which early magic exists. Objects within the home are also chosen with care. Items that may react unpredictably are placed out of reach, while others are introduced gradually. A child may be given simple magical objects that respond in limited ways, providing a controlled exposure to the idea of cause and effect. These objects do not teach magic directly, but they create a sense of interaction, allowing the child to begin forming connections between intention and outcome. At this stage, discipline is not strict, but it is consistent. The goal is not to enforce rules, but to establish patterns. Daily routines become important. Regular meals, predictable activities, and stable environments reduce the likelihood of uncontrolled magical responses. The child may not understand the purpose of this consistency, but it creates a foundation upon which later control can be built. There is also an increasing awareness of difference. The child begins to notice that their experiences do not match those of others outside their household. This awareness may be subtle, expressed through small observations rather than direct questions. A child may realize that certain events they consider normal are not shared by others. This realization does not yet lead to full understanding, but it marks the beginning of a shift in perception. In magical families, this awareness is guided carefully. Differences are acknowledged, but not emphasized. The child is taught that their experiences are part of a larger world, one that exists alongside the ordinary, but remains separate from it. This concept is introduced gradually, without overwhelming detail. The goal is to prepare the child for future understanding, not to explain everything at once. As the years progress, the child's relationship with magic becomes more defined, though still indirect. Accidental magic continues, but it becomes less frequent as emotional responses are moderated. The child begins to rely less on instinct and more on observation, even if they cannot yet act on what they have learned. There is a growing sense that magic is something that will become accessible in time, but not yet. The absence of formal instruction during this stage is intentional. Magic, in its early form, cannot be shaped through force or repetition. It requires readiness, both mental and emotional. Attempts to introduce structure too early often result in frustration, reinforcing the separation between intention and outcome. By allowing the child to develop naturally, the foundation for future learning remains stable. There are moments when curiosity becomes more pronounced. The child may ask direct questions about how magic works or why it cannot be controlled. The answers remain simple, often incomplete, but they provide enough context to maintain interest without creating confusion. The idea that magic will be taught at a later time becomes a quiet expectation, one that shapes the child's understanding of what lies ahead. This stage ends without clear distinction. There is no single moment when informal learning gives way to structure. Instead, the transition occurs gradually, marked by increasing awareness and anticipation. The child begins to understand that what they have observed is only a beginning, and that a more defined form of learning will follow. What remains from this period is not knowledge in the traditional sense, but familiarity. The child has not learned how to use magic, but they have learned that it exists, that it follows patterns, and that it must be approached with care. These lessons, though subtle, form the groundwork for everything that comes next, shaping not only how magic will be learned, but how it will be understood. Understanding at this stage begins to take a clearer form, though it is still not organized in the way formal education will later require. The child has already experienced magic as something instinctive and unpredictable, and has observed it within the routines of daily life. What now develops is a broader awareness of the world that surrounds that magic, not just how it appears, but where it belongs and where it does not. In magical households, this awareness is introduced gradually through conversation and routine exposure. The child begins to hear more about the structure of the wizarding world, though rarely in complete detail. References to places, institutions, and traditions appear in passing, woven into ordinary discussion. Names such as Hogwarts, Diagon Alley, and the Ministry are mentioned without full explanation, creating a sense of familiarity before understanding is fully formed. These references are not presented as lessons. They are part of the environment, absorbed over time rather than taught directly. There is also an increasing emphasis on behavior. The child is expected to follow certain patterns, not because they fully understand them, but because they are part of belonging. The idea of secrecy becomes more defined. It is no longer only implied through restriction, but acknowledged as a necessary part of life. The existence of a boundary between magical and non-magical worlds is introduced, though the reasons behind it are often simplified. The child learns that magic must remain unseen by those who do not share it, and that this separation is maintained carefully. For those raised outside magical families, this stage often arrives more abruptly, without prior context. The explanation of the wizarding world comes as a sudden expansion of reality. What was once confusing begins to take shape through structured introduction. The child is told not only that magic exists, but that it belongs to a hidden society with its own rules and expectations. The shift from uncertainty to understanding is significant, though it is not always immediate. There is a period of adjustment where familiar assumptions are replaced with new ones. Cultural knowledge becomes a quiet but constant presence. Traditions, values, and unspoken rules are absorbed through observation. The child begins to understand that magic is not only a tool, but part of an identity that carries its own expectations. Respect for magical ability, awareness of its limits, and recognition of its consequences are all introduced indirectly. These ideas are rarely presented as formal teachings. Instead, they emerge through repeated exposure to how others behave. Objects within the home begin to hold greater meaning. Books, artifacts, and everyday items reflect a larger world beyond immediate experience. A simple object may carry a history or function that extends beyond its appearance. The child may not fully understand these details, but they begin to recognize that magic exists within a broader system. This recognition creates curiosity, but also a sense of distance. There is an awareness that knowledge exists beyond what has been explained. Discussion of history becomes more common, though still selective. Stories of past events, notable figures, and significant developments are introduced in fragments. These stories are not always complete or detailed. They serve as points of reference rather than comprehensive lessons. The child learns that the wizarding world has a past, shaped by choices and consequences, even if the full scope of that history is not yet clear. At the same time, anticipation begins to form. The idea of formal education, once distant, becomes more defined. Hogwarts is no longer an abstract concept, but a future destination. The child begins to understand that there will come a time when observation is replaced by instruction. This expectation shapes behavior in subtle ways. There is a growing awareness that preparation, even without formal structure, has already begun. Identity also becomes more pronounced during this stage. The child starts to consider where they might belong within the structures they have heard about. The concept of houses, though not fully understood, introduces the idea that individuals are sorted based on qualities that may already exist. This creates a quiet form of self-reflection. The child may begin to notice their own tendencies, though without the language to fully describe them. Differences between individuals become more apparent as well. Within magical families, comparisons are often made, though not always directly. Siblings may show different levels of curiosity, different responses to early knowledge, and different expectations for the future. These differences are not yet defined by ability, but by disposition. The understanding that magic will not be experienced in the same way by everyone begins to take shape. There is also a subtle shift in responsibility. While the child is not yet expected to control magic, they are expected to understand the consequences of their environment. Actions are observed more closely, and behavior is guided with greater intention. Mistakes are corrected not only for immediate reasons, but for what they may represent later. The idea that choices matter, even before formal education begins, becomes part of daily life. This stage remains transitional, balanced between what has already been experienced and what is yet to come. The child has not begun formal learning, but the foundation for it is now more stable. There is a growing sense of direction, even if it is not fully understood. The world that once felt immediate and undefined now appears larger, more structured, and more distant. As time continues, the focus shifts further toward what lies ahead. The anticipation of formal education becomes central, shaping expectations and behavior. What was once learned through observation will soon be approached through instruction. The transition does not occur suddenly, but it becomes inevitable. The child moves forward, carrying with them a developing understanding of where they belong and an awareness that the next stage will require something more than observation alone. Anticipation at this stage becomes more defined, though it remains quiet and gradual rather than immediate or overwhelming. What was once a distant idea now begins to take shape with clearer expectation. The child understands that formal education is approaching, even if the exact moment has not yet arrived. This awareness does not bring sudden change, but it alters the way time is experienced. Days are no longer only part of routine. They begin to feel like preparation for something that has not yet fully revealed itself. In magical households, this period is often marked by subtle shifts in conversation. References to school become more direct. Details that were once mentioned in passing are now explained with greater clarity. The structure of Hogwarts, the existence of houses, and the nature of magical subjects are described with enough detail to form an outline. Though not enough to remove uncertainty, the child is not yet being taught, but they are being oriented toward what learning will require. Expectations remain measured. There is no pressure to demonstrate ability, as the understanding persists that true control cannot develop without instruction. Instead, emphasis is placed on readiness. The child is encouraged to observe, to listen, and to become familiar with the idea that learning will soon take a different form. This readiness is not tested, but it is quietly cultivated. For those raised outside magical environments, this stage often carries a different weight. The introduction to the wizarding world has already occurred, but its structure is still being absorbed. The idea of attending a school dedicated entirely to magic may feel both distant and immediate at the same time. There is a need to reconcile past experiences with what has now been explained. The anticipation of formal education becomes part of that adjustment, providing a clear point toward which everything seems to move. The Hogwarts letter, when it arrives, does not create the expectation, but confirms it. By the time it is received, The idea of attending has already taken hold. The letter provides structure to what was previously abstract. It establishes a specific time, a specific place, and a set of actions that must follow. The child is no longer preparing in a general sense. Preparation becomes directed, though still limited in scope. Acquiring school materials introduces a new form of interaction with the magical world. Items that were once distant or unfamiliar now become personal. A wand is chosen, though its significance may not yet be fully understood. Books are acquired, filled with knowledge that remains inaccessible until formal instruction begins. Robes, equipment, and supplies create a sense of transition, marking a movement from one stage of life to another. These objects do not yet serve their intended purpose, but they carry meaning. They represent a shift from observation to participation. The child begins to understand that magic will soon require effort, discipline, and engagement. The tools of education are present, but the ability to use them has not yet been developed. During this period, the relationship between the child and their family also changes slightly. Guidance becomes more intentional. Conversations may include advice about school life, expectations, and behavior. These discussions are not extensive, but they reflect an awareness that the child will soon move beyond the immediate environment of the home. There is an acknowledgement, often unspoken, that independence will increase. At the same time, uncertainty remains. The child may have heard descriptions of Hogwarts, but these descriptions are incomplete. The experience itself cannot be fully understood in advance. This uncertainty does not create fear in a direct sense, but it introduces a quiet tension. The known world of the home will soon be replaced by something structured and unfamiliar. Social awareness also begins to develop more clearly. The child may consider who else will be attending, even if they do not know them yet. The idea of meeting others who share the same experience becomes part of anticipation. There is a recognition that learning will not occur in isolation, but within a system that includes peers, instructors, and expectations that extend beyond the individual. The concept of belonging becomes more pronounced. The existence of houses introduces the idea that individuals are placed within groups based on qualities that may not yet be fully understood. The child may begin to wonder where they will fit, though there is no way to determine the outcome in advance. This uncertainty becomes part of the anticipation, shaping how the child views themselves, even before any decision has been made. Time during this stage feels both slow and accelerated. Each day passes within familiar routines, yet each day also brings the moment of departure closer. The balance between comfort and change defines this period. The child remains within the known environment, but their attention is increasingly directed toward what lies ahead. There is no formal instruction yet, but learning continues in a different form. The child becomes more aware of their surroundings, more attentive to conversations, and more reflective about their own place within the world they are beginning to understand. These changes are subtle, but they prepare the mind for the transition that is about to occur. As the moment of departure approaches, the separation from the familiar becomes more tangible. The home, once the center of experience, begins to feel like a starting point rather than a destination. The child does not leave immediately, but the awareness of leaving becomes part of daily thought. What was once stable and constant now carries the knowledge that it will soon change. This stage concludes not with a sudden shift, but with a movement toward structure. The anticipation that has been building gradually gives way to action. The child moves from preparation without instruction to a place where learning will be defined, measured, and guided. The next stage does not replace what has come before, but builds upon it, transforming familiarity into understanding and expectation into experience. The transition into formal education begins not with instruction, but with movement. The journey itself marks the first clear separation between the familiar and what follows. What was once anticipated now becomes immediate, shaped by specific actions that carry meaning beyond their surface. The departure from home is not presented as dramatic, but it carries a quiet weight. The child leaves behind an environment defined by routine and enters one defined by structure, even if that structure has not yet been experienced. The approach to the place of departure introduces the first signs of a shared system. Others arrive with similar purpose, each carrying their own expectations, though not always expressing them directly. The presence of many individuals at the same stage creates a sense of collective transition. What was previously personal now becomes part of a larger process. The child is no longer preparing alone, but alongside others who are moving toward the same destination. The act of crossing into the space where the journey begins is subtle, but it carries significance. It represents more than physical movement. It confirms that the child is now part of a world that operates with its own boundaries and rules. The separation between magical and non-magical spaces becomes visible in a way that was previously only understood in abstract terms. This moment is not explained in detail. The journey itself provides time for observation rather than instruction. The child is surrounded by others who are experiencing the same transition, though each responds in a different way. Some speak openly, sharing expectations or repeating what they have been told. Others remain quiet, observing without participating. The environment allows for interaction, but does not require it. There is no formal guidance during this time, only the presence of others moving in the same direction. Objects carried from home take on a different meaning during this journey. They are no longer part of daily life, but part of preparation. Books remain closed, their contents still inaccessible. Tools are present, but not yet used. These items serve as reminders that learning is about to begin, though it has not yet taken form. The child carries them without fully understanding how they will be used. As the destination approaches, the scale of the new environment becomes more apparent. What was once described in fragments is now experienced as a whole. The physical structure of the school, its size, and its presence create an immediate impression that cannot be replicated through explanation alone. The child begins to understand that this place operates beyond the limits of what has been previously known. The first moments within this new environment are defined by observation. There is movement, organization, and expectation, but no immediate demand for action. The child is guided, not through instruction, but through placement within the system. Others direct movement, indicating where to go and when to wait. These actions introduce the idea that learning will occur within a framework that is already established. Separation from family becomes fully realized at this point. What was once temporary distance becomes a sustained condition. Instead, they remain within the new environment, expected to adapt to its structure. This separation is not emphasized through emotion, but through routine. The absence of familiar guidance is replaced by institutional direction. The presence of authority figures becomes more defined. These individuals represent the structure that governs the environment. They do not provide immediate instruction, but they establish order. Their role is understood through behavior rather than explanation. The child observes how others respond to them, learning through example how authority operates within this system. The idea of belonging is introduced, though not yet resolved. The child is aware that placement within a group will occur, but the criteria for that placement remain unclear. This uncertainty becomes a central focus, not through direct concern, but through quiet awareness. The outcome will influence the experience that follows, even if its full significance is not yet understood. The process that determines this placement is presented as both simple and complex. It requires no prior knowledge, yet it reflects qualities that have been developing over time. The child participates without preparation, relying on what already exists within them. The result is immediate, but its implications extend far beyond the moment. Once placement is determined, the child becomes part of a defined group. This group provides structure, identity, and expectation. It shapes interactions, influences behavior, and creates a framework within which learning will occur. The child does not yet fully understand these effects, but they become evident through experience. The introduction to communal living follows naturally. The child is placed within shared spaces, where routines are established through repetition. Sleeping, eating, and studying occur within a collective environment, replacing the individual structure of the home. This change requires adjustment. Though it is not presented as difficult, it becomes part of the process of adaptation. At this stage, formal instruction has not yet begun, but the foundation for it has been established. The child understands that learning will occur within a system defined by rules, authority, and expectation. The transition from observation to participation is nearly complete, though the act of learning itself has not yet taken place. The first stage of formal education, then, is not defined by knowledge, but by entry. It is the moment when preparation becomes reality, when anticipation is replaced by presence. The child moves from a world where magic is observed and expected into one where it will be taught, practiced, and measured. What follows will require effort, discipline, and understanding. But for now, the focus remains on adjustment, on recognizing the structure that will shape everything that comes next. The process of placement does not end with arrival. It becomes clearer in the moments that follow, when the individual begins to understand what that placement means in practice. The grouping established earlier is no longer abstract. It shapes where the child sits, where they sleep, and with whom they spend most of their time. What was once uncertain becomes immediate, though its full influence is not yet understood. Within this structure, identity begins to take form through association. The child is not only an individual entering a system, but part of a defined group with its own history, expectations, and patterns of behavior. These qualities are not explained in full detail. Instead, they are revealed gradually through interaction. The way others speak, the way they respond to authority, and the way they approach learning all contribute to a shared understanding of what it means to belong. The influence of this grouping extends beyond simple organization. It creates a framework for comparison. The child begins to notice differences between groups, though these differences are not always clearly defined. Some appear more confident, others more reserved. Some value competition, while others emphasize cooperation. These observations are not formal lessons, but they shape perception in subtle ways. Authority reinforces this structure through routine. Expectations are communicated not through long explanations, but through consistent patterns. Where to go, when to arrive, and how to behave are established through repetition. The child learns by following these patterns, gradually understanding that adherence to structure is part of participation in the system. The physical environment also plays a role in shaping this experience. Details within these spaces reinforce a sense of belonging, even if the child does not consciously recognize them. Over time, familiarity develops, and the space begins to feel less like a temporary setting and more like a place of residence. Interaction with others becomes more frequent and more structured. Conversations are influenced by shared experience, though they remain informal. The child begins to understand that relationships within this environment are shaped not only by personality, but by proximity and routine. They are based on circumstance as much as choice. At the same time, differences between individuals become more visible. Some adapt quickly to the structure, while others take longer. Some engage actively with their surroundings, while others remain observant. These differences do not yet define long-term outcomes, but they introduce variation within the system. The child begins to recognize that the experience of education is not identical for everyone, even within the same group. Expectations remain present, though they are not yet fully demanding. The focus is still on adjustment rather than performance. Mistakes are expected and corrected without significant consequence. The child is given time to understand how the system operates before being required to meet its standards. This period allows for gradual adaptation, reducing the likelihood of immediate failure. The concept of responsibility begins to emerge more clearly. The child is expected to manage basic aspects of daily life without direct supervision. This includes following schedules, maintaining personal space, and responding to instruction. These responsibilities are simple, but they represent a shift from dependence to partial independence. The child learns that participation in the system requires active engagement, not passive observation. There is also a growing awareness of hierarchy. Authority figures hold clear positions within the structure, and their roles are defined by expectation rather than explanation. Older students may also occupy positions that influence the behavior of younger ones. The child observes these relationships, learning how authority operates at different levels within the environment. The initial sense of uncertainty begins to diminish as patterns become familiar. The child no longer questions every action or instruction. Instead, they begin to anticipate what is expected. This shift marks a transition from adaptation to participation. The child is no longer simply adjusting to the system, but functioning within it. At this stage, learning remains indirect. The focus is not yet on acquiring knowledge, but on understanding how knowledge will be acquired. The structure of education is becoming clear, even if its content has not yet been fully introduced. The child begins to see that learning will require attention, repetition, and adherence to established patterns. The sense of belonging continues to develop, though it remains incomplete. The child identifies with their group, but does not yet fully understand what that identity entails. It is shaped through experience rather than definition, growing stronger as familiarity increases. Over time, this identity will influence behavior, expectations, and relationships. But for now, it exists as a developing concept. The environment, once unfamiliar, begins to feel more stable. Movement within it becomes easier, and the need for guidance decreases. The child learns where to go, when to arrive, and how to respond without constant instruction. It allows the child to focus more fully on what will come next. This stage does not introduce formal knowledge, but it prepares the conditions for it. The structure is now understood well enough to support learning. The child has moved from observation to participation, from uncertainty to familiarity. What follows will require more direct engagement, but it will take place within a system that is now recognizable. The process of placement, then, is not a single event, but a gradual unfolding. It begins with assignment and continues through experience, shaping identity, behavior, and expectation. By the time this stage concludes, the child is no longer an outsider within the system. They have become part of it, ready to engage with the next level, where learning will take a more defined and measurable form. The beginning of formal instruction does not arrive with sudden intensity, but with a steady introduction to structure that has already been established. The child, now placed within the system and familiar with its routines, begins to encounter learning in its most defined form. What was once observed from a distance is now approached directly, though still with limitation. The expectation is not mastery, but foundation. Subjects are introduced in a consistent manner, each representing a different aspect of magic that must be understood separately before they can be combined. The structure of these lessons is clear. There is a defined time, a specific place, and an authority responsible for guiding the process. This order contrasts with the informal learning that came before, where knowledge was absorbed without direction. Now, direction is constant. The first lessons emphasize control over instinct. The child learns that magic does not respond reliably to emotion alone. It must be shaped through intention, supported by precise movement and clear focus. The use of a wand introduces a new relationship with magic. It acts as a channel, allowing energy to be directed rather than released without form. At first, this process feels unfamiliar. The connection between movement, word, and result is not immediate. It requires repetition, often without success. Mistakes are common and expected. A spell may fail entirely or produce an unintended result. These outcomes are not treated as failure in a final sense, but as part of the process. Correction follows each attempt, guiding the child toward a more accurate understanding of what is required. Over time, patterns begin to form. The child starts to recognize that magic responds to consistency, not impulse. Different subjects introduce different approaches to learning. Some require precise repetition, where small variations lead to different outcomes. Others rely more heavily on understanding underlying principles, where explanation is as important as execution. The child learns that magic is not uniform. It exists in multiple forms, each governed by its own rules. This diversity creates both challenge and opportunity. The pace of learning is measured. Progress is not expected to be rapid, but steady. Each concept builds upon the last, creating a sequence that must be followed. Skipping steps leads to confusion, reinforcing the importance of structure. The child begins to understand that learning magic requires patience. Immediate results are rare, and improvement comes through sustained effort. The presence of others influences this process. Learning does not occur in isolation, but within a group that shares the same experience. Observing others provides additional information. The child sees how different individuals approach the same task, noticing variations in success and difficulty. Some appear to grasp concepts quickly, while others require more time. These differences introduce comparison, though it remains informal. Feedback from authority figures becomes a central part of learning. Instruction is not only given, but evaluated. The child receives guidance on what is correct and what must be adjusted. This feedback is consistent, reinforcing the idea that learning is a process that can be measured. The presence of evaluation introduces a new form of awareness. The child begins to consider not only what they are doing, but how well they are doing it. The environment supports this structured learning. Classrooms are arranged to facilitate instruction, with materials prepared in advance and expectations clearly defined. Movement within these spaces follows a pattern, reducing uncertainty and allowing attention to focus on the task itself. The child becomes accustomed to this organization, recognizing it as part of the learning process. Over time, small successes begin to appear. A spell that once failed may produce a result, even if imperfect. These moments are not emphasized with strong emotion, but they carry quiet significance. They mark the beginning of control, the transition from possibility to ability. The child learns that magic can be shaped through effort, though it remains limited. At the same time, the limitations of ability become apparent. Not all attempts lead to success, and not all concepts are understood immediately. This recognition introduces a sense of realism. The child begins to understand that learning magic is not simply a matter of intention. It requires skill, practice, and sometimes acceptance of difficulty. The routine of lessons becomes familiar. Days are divided into periods of instruction, each focused on a different subject. This repetition creates stability, allowing the child to anticipate what will occur. The predictability of the schedule supports the development of discipline, as the child learns to prepare for each lesson and respond to its demands. Outside of formal instruction, learning continues in a less structured form. The child may review what has been taught, repeating actions to improve consistency. Conversations with others may reinforce understanding, though they are not required. These moments extend the learning process beyond the classroom, integrating it into daily life. The relationship between knowledge and application becomes clearer. The child begins to see that understanding a concept is not the same as performing it. Both are necessary, and both require attention. This distinction shapes how learning is approached, encouraging balance between theory and practice. Responsibility increases gradually. The child is expected to engage actively with the material, to attempt tasks even when uncertain, and to accept correction without resistance. These expectations are not presented as burdens, but as part of participation in the system. The child learns that progress depends on effort, not simply presence. As this stage continues, the initial uncertainty of formal education begins to fade. The child becomes more comfortable with the structure, more familiar with the expectations, and more capable of responding to instruction. Learning, once distant and abstract, becomes a regular part of daily life. This phase does not lead to mastery, but it establishes the foundation upon which all further learning will depend. The child has moved from observation to participation, and now from participation to active learning. What follows will build upon these foundations, introducing greater complexity and requiring deeper understanding. For now, the focus remains on consistency, on forming the habits that will support everything that comes next. As formal learning continues, the structure that once felt unfamiliar becomes part of daily routine. The child no longer approaches each lesson with uncertainty, but with a growing sense of expectation. The rhythm of instruction, practice, and correction repeats itself with enough consistency that it begins to feel natural. What once required conscious attention now occurs with less effort, allowing the focus to shift toward understanding rather than adjustment. Life within the shared environment becomes more defined. The child wakes and rests according to a pattern that rarely changes. Meals are taken at set times, lessons follow a predictable order, and the spaces between these activities are filled with quiet repetition. This structure does not limit experience, but organizes it. By removing uncertainty from daily life, it allows attention to be directed toward learning. Interaction with others also becomes more stable. Relationships that began through proximity begin to take clearer form. Some individuals remain close through shared experience, while others drift apart as differences become more apparent. These changes are gradual and often unspoken. The child begins to understand that social connections within this environment are shaped by both choice and circumstance. Differences in ability become more visible during this stage. What was once hidden by shared uncertainty is now revealed through repeated performance. Some individuals demonstrate consistent progress, while others struggle to achieve the same results. These differences are not emphasized directly, but they influence perception. The child begins to compare their own progress with that of others, though this comparison remains internal. The response to difficulty becomes an important part of development. When a task does not produce the expected result, the child must decide how to proceed. Some may repeat the action without change, hoping for improvement through persistence alone. Others may adjust their approach, considering what may have caused the failure. These choices shape the learning process, influencing how quickly understanding develops. Instruction continues to provide guidance, though it becomes less immediate. The child is expected to take a more active role in applying what has been taught. Feedback is still present, but it is not constant. There are moments when the child must rely on their own judgment, testing whether their understanding is sufficient to achieve the desired outcome. This shift introduces a greater sense of responsibility. The relationship between theory and practice becomes more balanced. Earlier lessons may have focused on basic execution, but now there is an increasing emphasis on why certain actions produce certain results. The child is encouraged to think beyond repetition, to consider the principles that govern magic. This deeper level of understanding does not replace practice, but supports it, creating a more stable foundation. Time outside of formal instruction gains importance. The child may spend these periods reviewing material, not because it is required, but because it improves consistency. Repetition outside the classroom reinforces what has been learned, allowing progress to continue even in the absence of direct guidance. This independent effort marks a shift towards self-directed learning. Though it remains within the structure of the institution, the environment continues to influence behavior in subtle ways. The presence of authority, the expectations of peers, and the routines of daily life all contribute to shaping how the child approaches learning. These influences are not always recognized, but they guide decisions and reinforce patterns. Over time, the child becomes more aligned with the system, responding to it with less resistance. Mistakes, once frequent and expected, become less common. Though they do not disappear, when they occur, they carry different meaning. They are no longer simply part of adjustment, but indicators of where understanding remains incomplete. The child begins to see mistakes as points of reference, guiding further effort rather than interrupting progress. Confidence develops gradually. It does not appear suddenly, but grows through repeated success. Each correct action reinforces the belief that improvement is possible. This confidence remains measured, as the child is aware that there is still much to learn. It supports continued effort without creating a false sense of mastery. At the same time, limitations remain present. Not all concepts are understood at the same rate, and not all skills develop equally. The child begins to recognize areas of strength and weakness, though these distinctions are not yet fixed. They serve as indicators rather than conclusions, suggesting where effort may be needed. The role of routine continues to be central. The child moves through each day with a sense of direction, even if the long-term outcome is not yet clear. This predictability supports stability, allowing focus to remain on development rather than adjustment. As this stage progresses, the child becomes more integrated into the system. What was once external now feels internal. The rules, expectations, and patterns of the environment are no longer imposed, but accepted. The child acts within them without constant reflection, indicating a deeper level of adaptation. Learning at this level remains foundational, but it is no longer tentative. The child has moved beyond initial adjustment and is now actively building the skills that will support more advanced study. The process is steady, without sudden change, but it leads toward greater complexity. The transition to the next stage does not occur abruptly. It develops through continued engagement as the child becomes more capable of handling increased difficulty. The structure remains, but the demands within it begin to grow. What follows will require more independence, more precision, and a deeper understanding of how magic operates. For now, the focus remains on consistency, on reinforcing what has been learned, and preparing for what will come next. As the early years of formal study continue, the nature of learning begins to shift in ways that are not immediately obvious. The structure remains the same, but the expectations within it begin to change. What was once focused on repetition and basic understanding now expands into something more complex. The child is no longer simply learning how to perform magic, but beginning to understand the conditions under which it succeeds or fails. Spells that once required careful attention to each movement begin to feel more familiar. The connection between wand, word, and result becomes clearer, though it is still not consistent. Small variations in focus or timing can still lead to failure, but the reasons behind these failures are easier to recognize. The child begins to correct mistakes with greater awareness, adjusting approach rather than repeating actions without change. The introduction of new material increases gradually. Subjects expand in scope, presenting information that builds upon earlier lessons while introducing additional complexity. Concepts that were once simple are revisited with greater depth. A spell that once served as an isolated exercise is now understood as part of a larger system, connected to principles that extend beyond its immediate use. This growing complexity requires a different kind of attention. The child must now consider not only what to do, but how different elements interact. Focus becomes more sustained, as tasks require longer periods of concentration. The process of learning slows in some areas, not because progress has stopped, but because each step requires more careful consideration. The role of practice changes as well. Repetition remains important, but it is no longer sufficient on its own. The child must think about what they are doing, not simply repeat it. This introduces a new form of effort, one that combines physical action with mental engagement. Success depends not only on consistency, but on understanding. The presence of risk becomes more noticeable at this stage. Earlier mistakes may have resulted in minor errors, but as complexity increases, so do the consequences of inaccuracy. Spells may behave unpredictably if not performed correctly. These outcomes are controlled within the learning environment, but they introduce a sense of caution. The child begins to understand that magic, while manageable, is not without consequence. Authority figures adjust their approach accordingly. Instruction becomes more detailed, and expectations are communicated with greater clarity. There is less emphasis on simple correction and more on explanation. The child is encouraged to understand why certain actions produce certain results, rather than relying solely on imitation. Interaction with peers continues to influence learning. Differences in ability become more pronounced, though they are still not fixed. Some individuals adapt quickly to the increasing complexity, while others require more time. These differences create a range of experiences within the same environment, allowing the child to observe multiple approaches to the same challenges. Collaboration may occur in small ways, though it is not always formal. Students may share observations, discuss difficulties, or compare outcomes. These interactions provide additional perspective, though they are not structured as lessons. The child learns that understanding can be shaped not only by instruction, but by exchange. The introduction of new subjects or areas of study broadens the scope of education. These additions are not entirely separate from earlier material, but extend it in new directions. The child begins to see that magic is not a single discipline, but a collection of interconnected fields. Each subject offers a different way of approaching the same underlying force. This expansion requires adjustment. The child must divide attention between multiple areas, each with its own expectations. Time becomes more structured as lessons are balanced with practice and rest. The ability to manage this balance becomes part of the learning process, though it is not taught directly. The concept of independence continues to develop. The child is expected to take greater responsibility for their own progress. This includes reviewing material, preparing for lessons, and addressing areas of difficulty without constant guidance. While support remains available, it is not always immediate. The child must learn to act without waiting for instruction. Confidence at this stage becomes more complex. It is no longer based solely on success, but on the ability to navigate difficulty. The child learns that uncertainty is part of the process, and that progress may not always be steady. This understanding supports resilience, allowing effort to continue even when results are not immediate. At the same time, the limits of current ability remain clear. The child begins to recognize that mastery is still distant. There are concepts that cannot yet be fully understood, and skills that require more time to develop. This awareness does not discourage learning, but frames it within a realistic context. The routine of daily life continues to provide stability. Despite increasing complexity, the structure of the environment remains consistent. This consistency allows the child to focus on learning without needing to adjust to new patterns. The balance between familiarity and challenge defines this stage, supporting gradual development. As the child progresses, there is a growing sense that learning is moving towards something more defined. The early years have established a foundation, but the direction of that foundation is becoming clearer. The child begins to understand that future learning will involve choice, that not all paths will remain open indefinitely. This realization is not immediate or fully formed, but it influences how the child approaches their studies. There is a subtle shift from general participation to focused engagement. Certain subjects may receive more attention, not because they are required, but because they hold greater interest or appear more accessible. The transition to the next stage emerges from this growing focus. The child has developed the ability to engage with more complex material, to manage increased responsibility, and to understand the relationship between effort and outcome. What follows will build upon these abilities, introducing new decisions and narrowing the path of learning. For now, the process continues steadily. The child remains within a structured environment, supported by routine and guided by instruction. Progress is measured not by sudden change, but by gradual improvement. Each step adds to what has already been learned, preparing for a stage where learning will become more specialized and where the direction of education will begin to take a more defined shape. As learning continues to expand, the range of subjects becomes more defined, and the idea of choice begins to take a clearer shape. The child, no longer limited to a fixed set of foundational lessons, is introduced to areas of study that extend beyond the core structure. These subjects do not replace what has already been learned, but add to it, creating pathways that lead in different directions. The introduction of these additional subjects is gradual. They are presented as options rather than requirements, though the selection itself carries quiet importance. The child must decide, often with limited understanding, which areas to pursue. This decision is not framed as final, but it shapes the experience that follows. The process introduces a new form of responsibility, one that requires consideration rather than simple compliance. Each subject offers a different approach to magic. Some focus on interaction with living creatures, requiring observation and patience rather than precise spell work. Others explore patterns and systems, where understanding depends on recognition of structure rather than repetition. There are subjects that rely on interpretation, where answers are not fixed, and outcomes may vary depending on perspective. These differences reveal that magic is not uniform, but diverse in both application and understanding. The child begins to recognize that learning is no longer identical for everyone. While core subjects remain shared, these additional areas create variation. Individuals follow slightly different paths, shaped by their choices and interests. This variation does not isolate them completely, but it introduces a level of distinction that was not present before. The experience of education becomes more personal, though still within a shared system. Adapting to these new subjects requires adjustment. The methods that were effective in earlier lessons may not apply in the same way. A subject that requires observation may not respond to repetition. A subject based on interpretation may not have clear answers. The child must learn to approach each area differently, developing flexibility in how they engage with new material. The presence of difficulty becomes more nuanced. Earlier challenges were often related to execution, where failure could be corrected through practice. Now, difficulty may arise from uncertainty. The child may not always know what is expected or how to achieve it. This lack of clarity requires a different form of effort, one that involves exploration rather than direct instruction. Authority figures continue to guide the process, but their role becomes less direct in certain areas. Instead of providing step-by-step instruction, they may offer direction without full explanation. The child is encouraged to interpret, to observe, and to draw conclusions independently. This approach introduces a greater degree of intellectual engagement, requiring the child to think beyond immediate outcomes. Time management becomes more important as well. With additional subjects, the structure of the day remains organized, but the demands within it increase. The child must divide attention across multiple areas, ensuring that each receives sufficient focus. It requires adjustment, as the child learns to allocate effort according to both requirement and interest. Interaction with peers reflects these changes. Conversations may shift towards specific subjects, with individuals sharing experiences that are not entirely the same. This creates opportunities for exchange, though it also highlights differences. The child becomes aware that others may have knowledge or experiences that they do not share, reinforcing the idea that education is no longer uniform. The sense of independence continues to grow. The child is expected to engage with their chosen subjects without constant supervision. Preparation, review, and practice increasingly occur outside of formal instruction. This independence is not complete, but it represents a step towards self-directed learning. The child begins to take ownership of their progress, recognizing that effort must come from within rather than being imposed. Confidence may fluctuate during this stage. Success in one subject does not guarantee success in another. The child learns that ability is not fixed across all areas, and that progress may vary depending on the nature of the material. This realization introduces complexity to the learning process, as the child must adapt to both strength and limitation. At the same time, interest begins to play a more significant role. The child may find certain subjects more engaging than others, leading to increased effort in those areas. This engagement supports deeper understanding, though it may also create imbalance if other subjects are neglected. The system does not immediately correct this, allowing the child to experience the consequences of their choices. The routine of daily life continues to provide stability, even as variation increases. The structure of lessons, meals, and rest remains consistent, supporting the growing complexity within the educational experience. This balance between consistency and change allows the child to adapt without becoming overwhelmed. There is also a gradual shift in perspective. The child begins to see education not only as a process of acquiring knowledge, but as a way of shaping future direction. The subjects chosen, the effort applied, and the understanding developed all contribute to what will come next. This awareness remains subtle, but it influences decision-making in ways that were not present before. Mistakes during this stage take on a different character. They are no longer limited to incorrect execution, but may involve misunderstanding or misinterpretation. Correcting these mistakes requires more than repetition. It requires reconsideration, adjustment, and sometimes acceptance that the approach itself must change. As this stage progresses, the child becomes more aware of the path ahead. The introduction of choice has created variation, and that variation will continue to expand. The foundation established in earlier years remains essential, but it is now being built upon in different ways. The direction of learning is beginning to take shape, though it is not yet fixed. The transition to the next stage will bring greater clarity, narrowing the range of possibilities and increasing the demands placed on the child. For now, the focus remains on exploration within structure, on learning how to approach different forms of knowledge, and on understanding that education is no longer a single path, but a series of choices that lead toward a more defined future. As the years progress, the expectations within the system become more clearly defined, and the child begins to understand that learning is no longer only about exposure or exploration. It becomes a process that requires consistent effort, measured performance, and a growing awareness of consequence. What was once flexible begins to settle into patterns that are less easily adjusted. Instruction continues, but the nature of that instruction changes. There is less repetition of basic concepts and more emphasis on applying what has already been learned. The child is expected to recall, adapt, and respond with greater accuracy. Mistakes are still present, but they are less frequent, and when they occur, they carry greater significance. They are no longer part of early adjustment, but indicators of where understanding has not yet reached the required level. The idea of responsibility becomes more central. The child is no longer guided through each step with the same level of support. There is an expectation that preparation occurs independently, that lessons are approached with prior knowledge already in place. This expectation is not always stated directly, but it is reinforced through outcome. Those who prepare effectively progress more steadily, while those who do not experience increasing difficulty, the pace of learning becomes more demanding. New material is introduced at a rate that assumes a stable foundation. There is less time to adjust and less opportunity to revisit earlier concepts in detail. The child must keep pace with the progression of the curriculum, relying on both understanding and discipline to maintain consistency. This increase in pace does not feel abrupt, but it is noticeable over time. Differences between individuals become more defined. Earlier variations in ability now begin to form patterns that are more difficult to change. Some individuals develop strong consistency across multiple subjects, while others begin to focus more narrowly. These differences are not imposed, but they emerge naturally through repeated experience. The child becomes more aware of their own position within this range. Though it is not always expressed openly, the role of evaluation becomes more visible. While earlier stages included feedback, this stage introduces a clearer sense of measurement. Performance is not only observed, but recorded in ways that influence future progression. The child begins to understand that their efforts contribute to a larger assessment, one that will shape the opportunities available to them later. This awareness introduces a new form of focus. Learning is no longer only about understanding, but about demonstrating that understanding under specific conditions. The child must learn to perform within these conditions, responding to expectation rather than simply engaging with the material. This does not replace genuine learning, but it adds a layer of structure that influences how learning is approached. The environment continues to provide stability, though the demands within it increase. The routines remain consistent, but the time required for preparation grows. The child may spend more time reviewing material, practicing techniques, and ensuring that knowledge is retained. This increase in effort becomes part of daily life, integrated into the existing structure rather than replacing it. Interaction with peers reflects these changes as well. Conversations may shift toward shared challenges, comparisons of progress, or discussion of expectations. The child becomes more aware that others are experiencing similar pressures, though each responds differently. Some may approach the situation with focus and discipline, while others may show signs of difficulty or uncertainty. The concept of independence continues to expand. The child is expected to manage not only their time, but their approach to learning. This includes deciding how to prepare, how to address areas of weakness, and how to maintain consistency across subjects. While guidance remains available, it is no longer constant. The child must act without waiting for instruction in many situations. At the same time, the limits of ability remain present. The child begins to recognize that effort alone does not always lead to immediate success. Some concepts require more time, and some skills develop more slowly. This recognition introduces a more realistic understanding of progress, one that balances expectation with limitation. Confidence during this stage becomes more complex. It is influenced not only by success, but by consistency. The child may feel capable in one moment and uncertain in another, depending on the demands of the task. This fluctuation is not unusual, but it requires adjustment. The child learns to continue despite uncertainty, relying on discipline rather than immediate reassurance. The idea of future direction becomes more defined. The child begins to understand that their current performance will influence the options available later. This understanding does not create immediate decision-making, but it shapes how effort is applied. There is a growing sense that learning is part of a longer process, one that extends beyond the current stage. Mistakes, when they occur, are approached differently. The child is expected to analyze them, to understand why they happened, and to adjust accordingly. This process requires reflection, not just repetition. It introduces a deeper level of engagement, where learning involves not only action, but thought. The structure of the system continues to support this development. By maintaining consistent routines and clear expectations, it allows the child to focus on the increasing complexity of learning. The balance between stability and demand remains, though the emphasis gradually shifts toward effort and performance. As this stage continues, the child becomes more aligned with the expectations of the system. They understand what is required, how to prepare, and how to respond. Learning is no longer unfamiliar, but it is no longer simple. It requires attention, discipline, and the ability to adapt to increasing demands. The transition to the next stage emerges from this alignment. The child has developed the ability to manage responsibility, to engage with complex material, and to understand the relationship between effort and outcome. What follows will formalize this process further, introducing evaluation at a level that carries lasting consequence. For now, the focus remains on maintaining consistency within increasing complexity. The child continues to learn, to adapt, and to prepare for what comes next. The system remains structured, but the demands within it continue to grow, guiding the child toward a stage where learning will be measured more directly and where the results of that measurement will begin to shape the path ahead. As the years continue, the sense of identity within the system becomes more defined. Though it is not formed through direct instruction, it develops gradually through repetition, expectation, and observation of how others respond within the same structure. The child begins to understand that their place within the system is not only determined by what they learn, but by how they are perceived over time. Reputation emerges quietly. It is not assigned, but built through consistent behavior. The way the child approaches lessons, responds to difficulty, and interacts with others contributes to an impression that becomes increasingly stable. This impression is not always discussed openly, but it influences how the child is treated by both peers and authority figures. Some individuals come to be recognized for consistent accuracy, their work reflecting careful attention and steady progress. Others may be known for hesitation, requiring more time to reach the same results. These distinctions are not absolute, but they begin to shape expectations. The child becomes aware that others anticipate certain behaviors from them, even before they act. This awareness introduces a new layer to the learning process. The child is no longer responding only to instruction, but also to perception. There is an understanding that actions contribute to an ongoing pattern, and that this pattern carries weight within the system. The child may begin to adjust behavior, not only to meet expectations, but to maintain consistency with what has already been established. The influence of grouping continues to play a role in this development. The identity associated with the child's group becomes more visible through comparison with others. Differences between groups, once subtle, become clearer through repeated interaction. These differences are expressed through behavior, priorities, and approach to learning, rather than direct explanation. The child begins to internalize these patterns, aligning behavior with the expectations associated with their group. This alignment is not forced, but it develops through familiarity. Over time, it becomes difficult to separate individual identity from group identity, as the two reinforce each other through repeated experience. Authority figures also respond to this emerging identity. Their expectations may shift based on observed behavior, offering more guidance in some cases and less in others. This variation is not always explicit, but it reflects a growing recognition of individual patterns. The child learns that consistency influences not only their own progress, but the way they are supported within the system. The structure of learning remains stable, but the experience within that structure becomes more individualized. The child begins to notice that their path is not identical to that of others, even if the framework is shared. This realization introduces a more personal connection to learning, where effort is shaped by both expectation and self-perception. At the same time, the concept of future direction becomes more tangible. The child is aware that their current performance contributes to opportunities that will arise later. This awareness does not lead to immediate decisions, but it creates a sense of continuity. Learning is no longer confined to the present, but connected to what lies ahead. The presence of comparison becomes more defined. The child observes not only their own progress, but the progress of others in relation to themselves. These observations are not always expressed, but they influence motivation. In some cases, they encourage greater effort. In others, they may lead to hesitation or uncertainty. The child learns to navigate these responses, though not always consciously. Confidence continues to develop, though it is influenced by consistency rather than isolated success. The child begins to trust their ability to respond to familiar challenges, even if new difficulties still create uncertainty. This trust is not absolute, but it supports continued engagement with the learning process. Mistakes at this stage carry a different meaning than before. They are no longer simply errors to be corrected, but interruptions in a pattern that has become more stable. The child is more aware of when something does not align with expectation, and this awareness influences how mistakes are addressed. There is a greater emphasis on understanding why the error occurred, rather than simply correcting it. The role of discipline becomes more internalized. Earlier stages relied on external structure to guide behavior, but now the child begins to regulate their own actions more consistently. Preparation, focus, and response to instruction are managed with less direct oversight. This shift reflects a deeper level of engagement with the system. Interaction with peers continues to evolve. Relationships may become more stable, shaped by shared experience and mutual understanding. At the same time, differences in approach and ability may create distance between individuals who were once closely aligned. These changes are gradual, often occurring without direct acknowledgement. The environment remains structured, but the child's experience within it becomes more nuanced. The routines are familiar, but the meaning attached to them has changed. Each lesson, each task, and each interaction contributes to a broader understanding of place within the system. There is also a growing sense of permanence. The child begins to recognize that patterns established now may continue into later stages. This recognition does not create immediate pressure, but it influences how effort is applied. There is an understanding that consistency matters, not only in the present, but over time. The balance between ability and expectation becomes more apparent. The child learns that meeting expectation requires not only skill, but sustained effort. Success is not defined by isolated moments, but by the ability to maintain performance across different conditions. This understanding supports a more stable approach to learning. As this stage continues, the child becomes more defined within the system. Identity, once fluid and uncertain, takes on clearer shape. It is influenced by experience, reinforced by repetition, and recognized by others. This identity does not limit potential, but it provides a framework within which development occurs. The transition to the next stage builds upon this foundation. The child has developed not only knowledge and skill, but a sense of place within the system. What follows will formalize this further, introducing evaluation that reflects not only what has been learned, but how consistently it has been applied. For now, the focus remains on maintaining stability, understanding identity, and preparing for the stage where learning will be measured in a more defined and lasting way. As this stage approaches, the structure of learning becomes more focused, and the presence of evaluation begins to move from background awareness to a central part of the experience. What was once an ongoing process of development is now directed toward a point where understanding must be demonstrated in a clear and measurable way. The child is no longer only learning for the sake of progression, but preparing for a moment where that progression will be assessed. The idea of examination is not entirely new, but it now carries greater weight. It is no longer a simple measure of progress within a lesson, but a formal system that determines how well knowledge has been retained and applied. This system does not change the structure of learning itself, but it changes how the child approaches it. Preparation becomes more deliberate, and attention is directed toward consistency rather than exploration. Subjects that were introduced gradually now take on greater importance. Each carries its own requirements, and each contributes to the overall assessment. The child must revisit earlier material, ensuring that foundational concepts remain clear. What was once learned in isolation must now be connected, forming a broader understanding that can be applied under structured conditions. The pace of learning adjusts in response to this focus. New material continues to be introduced, but there is also a return to what has already been covered. This repetition is not the same as in earlier stages. It is more purposeful, aimed at reinforcing understanding rather than establishing it for the first time. The child learns to review with intention, identifying areas that require further attention. Time becomes more structured as well. Periods that were once used for general study are now directed towards specific preparation. The child must decide how to allocate effort across subjects, balancing strengths and weaknesses. It requires awareness of one's own understanding and the ability to adjust focus when necessary. The presence of pressure becomes more noticeable, though it is not expressed in dramatic terms. It exists as a quiet expectation, reinforced by the knowledge that performance will have consequences. The child understands that results will influence future opportunities, even if the full extent of that influence is not yet clear. This awareness shapes behavior, encouraging greater attention to detail. Instruction during this stage reflects these changes. Authority figures provide guidance not only on content, but on how to prepare effectively. There is an emphasis on clarity, precision, and the ability to respond under defined conditions. The child is encouraged to think about how knowledge will be applied, rather than simply what has been learned. Practice takes on a more structured form. Exercises may resemble the conditions of formal evaluation, allowing the child to become familiar with what will be required. These practices are not identical to the final assessment, but they provide a framework that reduces uncertainty. The child learns to manage time, to organize thoughts, and to respond with accuracy within limited conditions. Interaction with peers often reflects a shared awareness of this stage. Conversations may focus on preparation, though not always directly. The child observes that others are adjusting their behavior in similar ways, devoting more time to study and showing increased attention during lessons. This collective shift reinforces the importance of the stage, even without explicit discussion. Confidence may fluctuate during this period. The child may feel certain in some areas and uncertain in others, depending on the level of understanding achieved. This variability requires adjustment, as the child learns to continue preparation despite incomplete confidence. The goal is not perfection, but reliability. Mistakes during this stage carry a different significance. They are no longer simply part of the learning process, but indicators of where further effort is required before evaluation occurs. The child must address these mistakes with intention, ensuring that they do not persist. This requires both awareness and discipline, as well as the willingness to revisit material that may already feel familiar. The structure of the environment remains consistent, providing stability as demands increase. Daily routines continue to organize time, but within those routines, the focus has shifted. Learning is no longer open-ended, but directed toward a defined outcome. This shift does not remove the value of understanding, but it adds a layer of expectation that shapes how understanding is demonstrated. As the moment of evaluation approaches, anticipation becomes more focused. It is no longer general, but tied to a specific event. The child is aware that preparation will lead to a point where effort must be translated into performance. This awareness does not create immediate change, but it reinforces the importance of consistent effort. The concept of readiness becomes central. The child must determine, often without external confirmation, whether they are prepared to meet the expectations placed upon them. This determination is not always clear, as understanding may feel complete in some areas and incomplete in others. The child learns to accept this uncertainty, continuing preparation until the moment of evaluation arrives. The transition into this stage reflects a broader shift within the system. Learning, once guided primarily by instruction, now requires self-direction. The child must take an active role in preparing for what lies ahead, using the structure provided while managing their own effort within it. This balance between guidance and independence defines the experience. As the stage continues, the child becomes more accustomed to this form of preparation. The initial uncertainty gives way to routine, and the process of review becomes more efficient. There is a growing sense that the knowledge acquired over previous years is being brought together, forming a more complete understanding. The movement toward evaluation does not conclude the learning process, but it marks a significant point within it. It provides a measure of progress, a way of determining how effectively knowledge has been developed and applied. What follows will depend in part on this outcome, shaping the direction of future learning. For now, the focus remains on preparation, on refining what has already been learned, and on developing the ability to demonstrate understanding under defined conditions. The child continues to move forward, guided by structure, supported by routine, and shaped by the growing awareness that learning is not only about acquiring knowledge, but about showing that it can be used with consistency and precision. The moment of evaluation arrives without sudden change, yet it carries a different quality from the stages that came before. What was once preparation now becomes demonstration. The child enters a process where knowledge must be applied under defined conditions, without the gradual support that guided earlier learning. The structure remains familiar, but the purpose within it has shifted. Each subject presents its own form of assessment. Some require precise execution, where accuracy in movement and focus determines the outcome. Others rely on recall and understanding, where information must be organized and expressed clearly. The child is expected to move between these forms without hesitation, adapting to each requirement as it appears. This transition is not entirely comfortable, but it reflects the varied nature of what has been learned. Time within this stage feels more measured. Tasks are completed within set limits, requiring attention not only to correctness, but to pacing. The child must balance thoroughness with efficiency, ensuring that effort is distributed appropriately. This balance is not always achieved easily. It requires awareness of both the task and the time available, a skill that has been developing quietly through earlier stages. The absence of immediate guidance becomes more noticeable. Authority figures remain present, but their role is no longer to instruct. Instead, they observe, ensuring that conditions remain consistent. The child must rely on their own preparation, applying knowledge without correction in the moment. This independence reveals the extent to which earlier learning has been internalized. Uncertainty may arise, though it is managed through discipline rather than reaction. When a question or task does not immediately align with expectation, the child must decide how to proceed without external confirmation. This decision is influenced by prior experience, by patterns recognized over time. The ability to respond despite uncertainty becomes an important part of performance. The environment remains controlled, but it feels different from the spaces of earlier learning. There is less movement, less conversation, and more focus on individual effort. Each child works within the same structure, but their experience is separate, defined by their own understanding. This separation highlights the personal nature of the process, even within a shared system. Results are not immediate. The child completes each part of the assessment without knowing how it will be judged. This delay reinforces the idea that learning is not only about the moment of action, but about preparation that has occurred over time. The outcome reflects a longer process, not a single instance. As the assessments continue, the child becomes more accustomed to the conditions. The initial adjustment gives way to routine, allowing focus to remain on the tasks themselves. Each completed portion contributes to a growing sense of completion, though the full outcome remains unknown. The variety of subjects ensures that no single approach is sufficient. The child must shift between different forms of thinking, applying knowledge in ways that reflect the nature of each discipline. This requirement emphasizes the importance of flexibility, a skill that has been developing through exposure to varied material. Mistakes, when they occur, cannot be corrected in the same way as before. There is no immediate feedback, no opportunity to adjust within the same moment. The child must continue, accepting that some outcomes are beyond revision. This acceptance requires a level of composure that has been shaped through earlier experience. The conclusion of this stage does not feel like an ending, but a pause. The child has completed the process, but the meaning of that completion is not yet clear. There is a period of waiting where effort has been expended and results are not yet known. This period reinforces the separation between action and consequence. During this time, the child returns to the routines that have been established. Lessons continue, though their focus may shift slightly. The intensity of preparation has passed, and the environment regains a sense of balance. The child remains within the system, but with an awareness that something has changed. When results are eventually received, they provide a measure of what has been achieved. Each outcome reflects the level of understanding demonstrated under structured conditions. These results are not interpreted in isolation, but in relation to what will come next. The process of narrowing begins here. The child must move forward with a reduced set of subjects, focusing on those that meet the required standard. This change is not presented as loss, but as progression. It reflects the transition from broad exposure to more focused study. The child begins to understand that education is not only about accumulation, but selection. Not all areas will be pursued equally, and not all paths remain open. This realization shapes how the child views their own development, introducing a sense of direction that was previously undefined. The system continues to provide structure, but within that structure, the experience becomes more specific. The child's path is no longer identical to that of others. Differences in outcome create variation in future learning, reinforcing the idea that education is both shared and individual. As this stage concludes, the child stands at a point of transition. The foundation has been tested, and the results have begun to shape what follows. The next stage will build upon this, requiring deeper focus and greater commitment within a narrower range of subjects. For now, the emphasis remains on understanding what has been achieved. The process of evaluation has revealed both strength and limitation, providing a clearer picture of where effort will be directed next. The child moves forward, not with complete certainty, but with a more defined sense of direction, shaped by the outcomes of this stage and the expectations that follow. After the point of evaluation, the structure of learning becomes more focused, and the range of subjects narrows in a way that reflects previous performance. What was once broad and exploratory now begins to take on a more defined shape. The child continues within the same environment, guided by the same routines, but the content within those routines has changed. There is less emphasis on general exposure and more attention directed towards subjects that require deeper understanding. The remaining areas of study are no longer introductory. They assume familiarity with fundamental concepts and build upon them without revisiting earlier stages in detail. The child is expected to carry forward what has already been learned, applying it with greater precision and consistency. There is less tolerance for uncertainty and less space for hesitation. Each action is expected to reflect a level of control that has been developed over time. Classes become smaller as the number of participants decreases. This change alters the learning environment in subtle ways. With fewer individuals, interaction becomes more direct, and the presence of each student is more visible. The child is less able to remain unnoticed, as their contributions are more clearly observed. This increased visibility reinforces the expectation of engagement. Instruction takes on a different tone. Authority figures shift from guiding basic understanding to refining existing ability. Explanations become more detailed, focusing on the nuances of each subject rather than its general structure. The child is encouraged to consider not only how something works, but how it can be improved, adjusted, or applied in different contexts. This level of engagement requires sustained attention. The pace of learning remains steady, but the depth increases. Concepts are explored more thoroughly, often requiring extended periods of focus. The child must hold multiple ideas at once, understanding how they interact rather than viewing them in isolation. This complexity is not introduced abruptly, but it becomes more apparent over time. Practice continues to play a central role, though its purpose evolves. Repetition is still necessary, but it is no longer aimed at achieving basic success. Instead, it focuses on refinement, reducing inconsistency, and improving accuracy. The child learns to recognize small variations in outcome, adjusting technique to achieve greater control. The relationship between effort and result becomes more precise. Earlier stages allowed for gradual improvement through repeated attempts, but now each action carries greater expectation. The child must approach tasks with intention, understanding that results reflect not only knowledge, but the ability to apply it consistently. Independence becomes more significant during this stage. The child is expected to manage their own preparation with minimal guidance. This includes reviewing material, practicing techniques, and addressing areas of difficulty without direct instruction. The structure of the environment remains supportive, but the responsibility for progress rests more heavily on the individual. Confidence may stabilize in some areas, particularly where consistent success has been achieved. At the same time, new challenges may introduce uncertainty. The child learns to navigate both, recognizing that confidence is not uniform across all subjects. This understanding supports a more balanced approach to learning, where effort is directed according to need. The presence of comparison continues, though it becomes more focused. With fewer participants in each subject, differences in ability are more noticeable. The child observes these differences, though they may not always respond to them directly. Instead, they begin to focus more on their own progress, recognizing that advancement depends on individual effort rather than comparison alone. The idea of future direction becomes more defined. The subjects that remain are those that align with the child's demonstrated ability. This alignment suggests possible paths beyond the current stage, though these paths are not yet fixed. The child begins to see how their choices and performance contribute to what lies ahead. Time management remains important, though it is applied within a narrower range. The child must allocate effort carefully, ensuring that each subject receives sufficient attention. This balance becomes more manageable due to the reduced number of subjects, but the increased complexity requires sustained focus. Mistakes, when they occur, are addressed with greater precision. The child is expected to identify the source of the error and adjust accordingly. This process requires both awareness and discipline. As the margin for error becomes smaller, correction is no longer a simple repetition, but a deliberate adjustment. The environment continues to provide stability, maintaining the routines that support learning. The balance between familiarity and challenge remains, though the emphasis has shifted toward deeper engagement. As this stage progresses, the child becomes more aligned with the expectations of advanced study. They understand the requirements, respond with greater consistency, and manage their own learning with increased independence. The transition from general education to focused development becomes more complete. There is also a growing awareness that the end of this stage will lead to another form of evaluation. The child understands that current effort contributes not only to immediate progress, but to future assessment. This awareness shapes behavior, encouraging continued attention to detail and consistency. The experience of learning at this level is no longer introductory. It is defined by refinement, precision, and sustained effort. The child is not simply acquiring knowledge, but shaping it into a form that can be applied reliably. This process prepares them for the next stage, where learning will be measured again, but under conditions that require even greater depth of understanding. For now, the focus remains on maintaining consistency within a more demanding framework. The child continues to build upon what has already been established, moving steadily toward a point where their knowledge and ability will be tested once more. The path has narrowed, but it has also become clearer, guiding the child toward a more defined role within the system. As the period of advanced study continues, the boundaries between subjects begin to feel less distinct. What was once learned in separate contexts now starts to connect in subtle ways. The child begins to recognize that knowledge does not exist in isolation, but as part of a larger system where each element supports the others. This recognition does not arrive suddenly, but develops through repeated exposure to increasingly complex material. The focus of learning shifts further toward depth rather than breadth. There is less introduction of entirely new concepts and more emphasis on understanding existing ones at a higher level. The child is expected to engage with material in a more analytical way, considering not only how something works, but why it works in that particular manner. This level of inquiry requires sustained attention and a willingness to explore beyond immediate results. Instruction reflects this change. Authority figures provide less direct guidance, allowing the child to engage more independently with the material. Questions are encouraged, though answers are not always provided immediately. The child is expected to consider possibilities, to test ideas, and to arrive at conclusions through a process that is not always straightforward. This approach reinforces the idea that learning at this level involves exploration within structure. Practical work becomes more precise. Tasks that once required general accuracy now demand careful attention to detail. Small variations in execution can lead to different outcomes, and the child must learn to recognize and control these variations. This process requires patience, as improvement is often gradual and not always immediately visible. The relationship between theory and practice becomes more integrated. The child begins to understand that theoretical knowledge supports practical application, and that practical experience reinforces theoretical understanding. This connection creates a more stable form of learning, where each aspect strengthens the other. Time spent outside of formal instruction gains increased importance. Independent study is no longer optional, but necessary. The child must review material, practice techniques, and prepare for future lessons without constant supervision. This independence is not complete, but it represents a significant step toward managing learning without external control. Confidence during this stage is often measured rather than expansive. The child may feel capable within familiar contexts, but remains aware of the complexity that lies ahead. This awareness prevents overconfidence, encouraging a steady approach to learning that values consistency over immediate success. At the same time, limitations become more clearly defined. The child begins to understand that not all aspects of magic can be mastered easily, and that some areas may require more effort than others. This realization does not restrict progress, but it shapes how effort is applied. The child learns to direct attention where it is most needed, rather than approaching all material in the same way. Interaction with peers continues, though it often reflects a shared focus on advanced study. Conversations may center on specific challenges or areas of interest, providing opportunities for exchange. These interactions are not structured as formal learning, but they contribute to understanding by offering different perspectives. The presence of evaluation remains in the background, though it has not yet reached the intensity of the final stage. The child is aware that current performance contributes to future assessment, but the emphasis remains on preparation rather than demonstration. This awareness encourages consistent effort, without creating immediate pressure. The environment continues to support learning through its established routines. The structure of daily life remains stable, allowing the child to focus on the increasing complexity of the material. This stability is essential, as it provides a foundation that supports deeper engagement without requiring constant adjustment. Mistakes during this stage are approached with greater precision. The child is expected to analyze errors, identifying not only what went wrong, but why it occurred. This process requires reflection and adjustment, reinforcing the importance of understanding over repetition. Correction becomes a deliberate action, rather than a simple response. The concept of mastery begins to take on a different meaning. It is no longer defined by the ability to perform a task successfully, but by the consistency and reliability of that performance. The child learns that mastery is not achieved through isolated success, but through sustained accuracy across different conditions. As this stage progresses, the child becomes more aware of the direction of their learning. The subjects they continue to study reflect their developing strengths, and the depth of engagement within those subjects suggests possible paths beyond the current stage. This awareness remains quiet, but it influences how effort is applied. There is also a growing sense of transition. The child understands that this stage represents a movement toward a final point within the system of formal education. The knowledge and skills being developed are not ends in themselves, but part of a process that will soon be evaluated once more. The balance between independence and structure continues to define the experience. The child operates with greater autonomy, but within a framework that provides guidance and expectation. This balance allows for growth without removing the support that has been present throughout earlier stages. As the stage continues, the child becomes more aligned with the demands of advanced study. They engage with material at a deeper level, manage their own learning with increased responsibility, and respond to challenges with greater consistency. The transition from structured learning to independent understanding becomes more complete. What follows will bring this process to a point of assessment, where knowledge must once again be demonstrated under defined conditions. For now, the focus remains on refinement, on deepening understanding, and on preparing for the stage where learning will be measured in a way that reflects not only what has been learned, but how effectively it can be applied. As the final stage of formal study approaches, the structure of learning becomes increasingly directed toward a single outcome. What was once a process of gradual development now moves toward completion, defined by a second and more advanced system of evaluation. The child, no longer in the earliest stages of learning, understands that this moment will reflect not only recent effort, but the accumulation of years of study. The remaining subjects now carry greater weight. Each requires a level of understanding that extends beyond basic execution, demanding consistency, precision, and the ability to respond under structured conditions. The child is expected to engage with these subjects at a level that reflects readiness for life beyond the institution. This expectation is not stated directly in every instance, but it is present in the design of the tasks and the nature of instruction. Preparation becomes more focused and deliberate. The child revisits material with a clear sense of purpose, identifying areas that require further attention. This process is not identical to earlier stages of review. It is more selective, directed toward ensuring that knowledge can be applied reliably rather than simply recalled. The child learns to recognize patterns in their own understanding, adjusting effort where necessary. The pace of learning remains steady, though the emphasis shifts toward consolidation. New concepts may still be introduced, but they are fewer in number and more closely connected to existing knowledge. The goal is not expansion, but completion. The child works to bring together what has already been learned, forming a more cohesive understanding. Time is managed with greater care. The child must balance ongoing instruction with independent preparation, ensuring that each subject receives sufficient attention. This balance requires awareness of both strengths and limitations. The child learns to allocate effort where it is most needed, rather than distributing it evenly without consideration. The presence of evaluation is now more immediate. Unlike earlier stages, where assessment remained distant, this stage places it at the center of the experience. The child understands that performance will influence what follows, shaping the opportunities available after formal education ends. This awareness introduces a quiet sense of urgency, though it is expressed through discipline rather than visible tension. Instruction reflects this shift. Authority figures provide guidance that is more specific, addressing areas where improvement is required. There is less general explanation and more targeted support, focusing on refining existing ability. The child is expected to respond to this guidance with attention, integrating it into their preparation. Practice takes on a more structured form, often resembling the conditions of formal evaluation. The child becomes familiar with the format and expectations, reducing uncertainty when the moment arrives. This familiarity does not guarantee success, but it supports confidence by making the process more predictable. The role of independence continues to expand. The child is responsible for managing their own preparation, determining how to approach each subject and how to address areas of difficulty. This responsibility is not optional. It reflects the expectation that learning has progressed to a point where self-direction is necessary. Confidence during this stage is influenced by preparation rather than immediate outcome. The child may not feel certain in every area, but they understand that effort contributes to readiness. This understanding allows them to continue despite uncertainty, focusing on what can be controlled rather than what cannot. Mistakes during preparation are treated as opportunities for adjustment. The child is expected to identify weaknesses and address them before evaluation occurs. This process requires reflection and discipline, reinforcing the importance of understanding over repetition. The environment remains stable, providing the structure necessary to support this final phase of learning. Routines continue to organize time, allowing the child to focus on preparation without needing to adapt to new patterns. This consistency is essential, as it supports the increasing demands placed on the individual. Interaction with peers often reflects a shared awareness of the stage. Individuals may approach preparation differently, but they recognize that the outcome will affect each of them. This shared experience creates a sense of collective movement toward a common point, even if each path remains individual. As the moment of evaluation approaches, anticipation becomes more defined. It is no longer a distant concept, but an immediate reality. The child understands that preparation will soon give way to performance, and that the results of that performance will shape what comes next. The transition into evaluation occurs without dramatic change. The structure remains familiar, but the purpose within it is clear. The child moves from preparation to demonstration, applying knowledge under conditions that require both accuracy and consistency. This process reflects the culmination of formal education, bringing together all that has been learned. The conclusion of this stage does not end the process of learning, but it marks the completion of a structured phase. The child has moved through a system designed to develop ability, refine understanding, and prepare for independence. The results of this stage will determine how that independence takes form. For now, the focus remains on completing the process with care and attention. The child continues to prepare, to refine, and to engage with the material at a level that reflects the expectations placed upon them. The path that began with uncontrolled magic has led to this point, where knowledge must be demonstrated with clarity and precision, setting the stage for what lies beyond formal education. The final stage of evaluation arrives with a sense of familiarity shaped by earlier experience, yet it carries a different weight. What was once preparation now becomes a series of moments where knowledge must be applied with consistency and clarity. The structure remains controlled, but the expectations within it are higher, reflecting the level of study that has been reached. Each subject presents its own form of assessment, requiring the child to move between different modes of thinking. Some tasks demand precise execution, where control over movement and focus must be maintained without error. Others require explanation, where understanding must be expressed in a way that is both clear and complete. The child is expected to adapt quickly, responding to each requirement without hesitation. Time remains a defining factor. Tasks are completed within limits that require careful management of attention and effort. The child must balance accuracy with efficiency, ensuring that each response meets expectation without exceeding what is possible within the available time. This balance has been practiced, but its importance becomes more apparent during evaluation. The absence of direct guidance continues. Authority figures observe, ensuring that conditions remain consistent, but they do not intervene. The child must rely entirely on preparation, applying knowledge without immediate correction. This independence reflects the purpose of the stage, where learning is no longer supported moment by moment, but demonstrated through action. Uncertainty may still arise, though it is handled with greater composure. The child has experienced similar conditions before and understands how to proceed despite incomplete confidence. Decisions are made based on prior knowledge, with the understanding that not every outcome can be controlled. This acceptance allows the process to continue without interruption. The environment remains quiet and focused, emphasizing individual effort within a shared structure. Each participant works independently, though the conditions are the same for all. This balance between shared experience and individual responsibility defines the stage, reinforcing the idea that results reflect personal preparation. As the assessments continue, the child becomes more accustomed to the rhythm of the process. The initial adjustment fades, replaced by a steady approach that relies on established habits. Each completed task contributes to a sense of progression, though the final outcome remains unknown. The range of subjects ensures that understanding is tested in multiple ways. The child must demonstrate not only knowledge, but the ability to apply that knowledge across different contexts. This requirement highlights the depth of learning that has been developed, as well as any areas where understanding remains incomplete. Mistakes, when they occur, cannot be revisited within the same moment. The child must continue, recognizing that evaluation reflects overall performance rather than isolated errors. This understanding supports a steady approach where attention remains focused on what can still be achieved. As the final assessments conclude, there is a shift in awareness. The process that has defined learning for years reaches a point of completion. The child has moved through a system designed to develop ability and now stands at the end of that structured path. The results of this stage will determine how that ability is recognized within the wider world. The period that follows is marked by waiting. The child returns to familiar routines, though the intensity of preparation has passed. There is a sense of pause where effort has been expended and outcomes have yet to be revealed. This pause reinforces the separation between action and consequence. When results are eventually received, they provide a clear measure of what has been achieved. Each outcome reflects the level of understanding demonstrated under structured conditions. These results do not exist in isolation. They influence future opportunities, determining which paths remain open and which are no longer available. The transition that follows is shaped by these outcomes. The child moves beyond formal education, no longer defined by the routines of the institution. The structure that once guided daily life is replaced by a broader environment where learning continues in different forms. The shift is gradual, but it marks a significant change in the nature of experience. The end of formal study does not remove the need for learning. Instead, it changes its form. The child, now approaching independence, must apply knowledge without the same level of support. The habits developed during earlier stages become essential, guiding behavior in the absence of structured instruction. There is also a growing awareness of responsibility. The child understands that knowledge carries consequence beyond the classroom. Decisions made in the future will rely on what has been learned, and the ability to apply that knowledge will shape outcomes in ways that extend beyond education. The system that has guided development remains present in memory, even as its direct influence decreases. The routines, expectations, and patterns of learning continue to shape behavior, providing a foundation for what follows. The child carries these elements forward, integrating them into a broader understanding of the world. As this stage concludes, the transition into independence becomes more defined. The child is no longer preparing for evaluation, but for application. The knowledge gained through structured learning must now be used in contexts that are less controlled and more varied. The path ahead is not fully defined, but it is shaped by what has already been achieved. The results of evaluation provide direction, suggesting possibilities without determining them completely. The child moves forward with a clearer sense of ability, though uncertainty remains part of the process. The completion of this stage marks the end of formal education within the system, but it does not mark the end of learning. Instead, it represents a shift from structured development to independent growth. What follows will require adaptation, responsibility, and continued engagement with knowledge in new forms. For now, the focus rests on the transition itself. The child steps beyond the system that has shaped their development, carrying with them the understanding, habits, and expectations that have been built over time. The journey that began with instinct has reached a point of clarity, setting the foundation for what will come next. After the completion of formal study, the structure that once guided learning begins to shift in a way that is gradual rather than immediate. The child, no longer positioned within a fixed system of instruction, enters a stage where knowledge must be applied within a broader environment. What was once defined by routine and expectation is now shaped by context and purpose. The transition into this stage does not remove the influence of previous learning. The habits developed over years of structured education remain present, guiding behavior even without direct oversight. The individual continues to approach tasks with attention and consistency, though the conditions under which those tasks occur are no longer controlled in the same way. Opportunities for further development begin to appear, often in the form of specialized paths that extend beyond general education. These paths are not identical, and they require different forms of preparation. Some focus on enforcement of magical law, requiring discipline and the ability to respond to unpredictable situations. Others center on healing, where knowledge must be applied with precision and care. There are also roles within the broader system of governance, where understanding of structure and regulation becomes essential. Entry into these paths often involves additional stages of learning, though they differ from earlier forms of education. Instruction is more focused, directed towards specific outcomes rather than general understanding. The individual is expected to build upon existing knowledge, applying it in ways that reflect the requirements of the chosen path. This stage introduces a new relationship between learning and responsibility. The individual is no longer preparing for evaluation within an isolated system, but for actions that carry real consequence. The knowledge acquired must now be used in situations that extend beyond controlled environments. This shift requires adjustment, as the certainty provided by structured learning is replaced by conditions that are less predictable. The presence of guidance remains, though it takes a different form. Experienced individuals provide direction, not through formal lessons, but through demonstration and correction within practical contexts. The individual learns by observing, by participating, and by responding to situations as they arise. This method of learning is less structured, but it remains consistent in its purpose. Mistakes during this stage carry greater significance. They are no longer limited to exercises within a controlled environment, but may affect outcomes in ways that cannot be easily reversed. This awareness influences behavior, encouraging careful consideration before action. The individual learns to approach situations with a level of attention that reflects the potential consequences. The concept of independence becomes more complete. The individual is expected to act without constant supervision, making decisions based on prior knowledge and experience. This independence does not remove the possibility of guidance, but it requires the individual to take primary responsibility for their action. At the same time, limitations remain present. The individual may encounter situations that extend beyond their current level of understanding. In these cases, the ability to seek assistance becomes important. Independence does not mean isolation, but the capacity to recognize when support is necessary. The environment within which learning now occurs is less defined. It is shaped by the demands of the chosen path, rather than by a fixed institutional structure. This variation requires flexibility, as the individual must adapt to different conditions while maintaining consistency in their approach. Confidence during this stage is influenced by experience. Successful application of knowledge reinforces the ability to act with assurance, while uncertainty introduces caution. The individual learns to balance these responses, maintaining focus without becoming overconfident. The relationship between knowledge and action becomes central. The individual begins to understand that learning is not complete until it is applied effectively. This understanding shapes how knowledge is used, encouraging a deliberate approach that considers both method and outcome. Interaction with others continues to play a role, though it is often more collaborative. The individual may work alongside others who share similar responsibilities, exchanging information and supporting one another within practical contexts. These interactions reinforce the idea that learning remains ongoing, shaped by both individual effort and collective experience. The structure of time also changes. There are no longer fixed periods of instruction, but rather a sequence of tasks and responsibilities that vary depending on circumstance. The individual must manage time independently, ensuring that preparation and action are balanced effectively. As this stage progresses, the individual becomes more familiar with the demands of their chosen path. The initial adjustment gives way to a steady approach, where knowledge is applied with greater consistency. The transition from structured learning to practical application becomes more complete, though it remains a process rather than a single moment. The idea of mastery continues to evolve. It is no longer defined by performance within an academic setting, but by the ability to respond effectively in real situations. This form of mastery requires both knowledge and judgment, shaped through repeated experience. The system of education, though no longer directly present, continues to influence this stage. The principles established earlier remain relevant, guiding how the individual approaches new challenges. The connection between past learning and present action becomes more apparent over time. As the individual moves further into this stage, there is a growing sense of continuity. Learning has not ended, but changed in form. It continues through experience, through reflection, and through the ongoing application of knowledge in varied contexts. The path ahead remains open, though it is shaped by the choices made and the skills developed. The individual moves forward with a clearer understanding of their abilities, prepared to engage with the world beyond formal education. This stage does not conclude the process of learning, but marks a transition into a form that is less visible, yet equally significant. The individual carries forward the knowledge, habits, and understanding developed over time, applying them in ways that extend beyond the structure that once defined them. As this stage continues, the process of learning becomes more closely tied to experience than to instruction. The individual, now operating within a chosen path, develops understanding through repeated exposure to situations that cannot be fully predicted in advance. What was once learned in controlled environments must now be adapted to conditions that vary in complexity and outcome. Guidance remains present, though it is less structured. Experienced practitioners offer direction through example, demonstrating how knowledge is applied in practice. The individual observes not only the outcome, but the method, learning to recognize patterns in decision-making. These observations provide a form of instruction that is not formal, but consistent in its influence. The relationship between mentor and learner becomes more defined during this stage. The individual is no longer guided through general concepts, but through specific applications. Correction occurs within the context of action, often immediately following an attempt. This form of feedback is direct, focusing on what was effective and what requires adjustment. The individual learns to respond quickly, integrating guidance into subsequent actions. Responsibility continues to expand. The individual is expected to take part in tasks that carry real consequence, contributing to outcomes that extend beyond personal development. This participation is not immediate or complete, but increases gradually as competence is demonstrated. The individual moves from observation to involvement, and from involvement to active contribution. Mistakes during this stage are approached with care. They are not avoided entirely, but they are managed within a framework that prioritizes learning while minimizing risk. The individual learns to recognize the conditions under which errors are more likely to occur, adjusting behavior to reduce their impact. This awareness becomes an essential part of practical learning. The environment in which this learning takes place is less predictable than before. Each situation may present different challenges, requiring the individual to adapt rather than rely on fixed patterns. This variability introduces complexity, but it also provides opportunities for growth. The individual learns to respond to change, maintaining consistency in approach while adjusting to new conditions. Time is structured differently at this stage. There are no fixed lessons, but a sequence of responsibilities that must be managed effectively. The individual must decide how to allocate effort, balancing preparation with action. This process requires awareness of both immediate tasks and longer-term goals, reinforcing the importance of planning. Confidence develops through experience rather than instruction. Each successful outcome reinforces the ability to act with assurance, while each challenge introduces a need for reflection. The individual learns to rely on accumulated knowledge, applying it with increasing consistency. This confidence remains measured, shaped by an understanding of both capability and limitation. The connection between theory and practice becomes more immediate. Concepts that were once abstract are now applied directly, revealing their relevance in real situations. The individual begins to see how earlier learning supports current action, creating a sense of continuity between stages. This connection reinforces the value of foundational knowledge. Interaction with others remains an important aspect of learning. The individual works alongside peers and mentors, observing different approaches to similar challenges. These interactions provide additional perspective, allowing the individual to refine their own methods. Learning becomes a shared process. Though each experience remains individual, the role of reflection becomes more significant. After each task, the individual considers what occurred, identifying both strengths and areas for improvement. This reflection is not always formal, but it influences future actions. The ability to learn from experience becomes as important as the experience itself. Independence continues to grow, though it is balanced by the presence of guidance. The individual is expected to act without constant supervision, but remains aware that support is available when needed. This balance allows for development without complete isolation, providing a framework within which learning can continue. The idea of mastery begins to shift further. It is no longer associated with completion, but with the ability to adapt knowledge to new situations. The individual learns that mastery is not a fixed state, but an ongoing process that evolves through experience. This understanding encourages continued engagement with learning. Challenges during this stage are often more complex than those encountered before. They may involve multiple variables, requiring the individual to consider different factors simultaneously. The ability to manage this complexity develops gradually, supported by both experience and reflection. The influence of earlier education remains evident. The structure, discipline, and habits developed during formal study continue to guide behavior. The individual relies on these foundations when facing new challenges, demonstrating the lasting impact of structured learning. As this stage progresses, the individual becomes more integrated into their chosen path. The initial uncertainty of transition gives way to a more stable sense of direction. The individual understands the expectations of their role and responds to them with increasing consistency. The process of learning continues without clear boundaries. There is no defined endpoint, only ongoing development shaped by experience. The individual moves forward, building upon what has already been achieved, while adapting to new conditions. This stage represents a continuation of education in a different form. It is less visible, less structured, but equally significant. The individual carries forward the knowledge and habits developed earlier, applying them in ways that extend beyond the limits of formal instruction. The path ahead remains open, defined by both choice and circumstance. The individual continues to learn, not through a fixed system, but through engagement with the world around them. What was once guided by instruction is now shaped by experience, marking a further step in the progression from structured education to independent understanding. As experience accumulates, the individual begins to operate with less reliance on direct guidance and more on internalized patterns of thought and action. What was once learned through instruction and reinforced through supervision is now applied with increasing independence. The process of learning continues, but it is no longer separated from daily activity. It becomes part of how the individual approaches each situation, shaping decisions in ways that are often not immediately visible. Magic, once approached as a subject to be understood, is now used as a tool within a wider context. The individual no longer focuses on individual spells as isolated tasks, but on how those spells contribute to an outcome. This shift reflects a deeper level of understanding, where knowledge is organized according to purpose rather than category. The distinction between learning and application becomes less defined. The absence of a structured environment requires a different form of discipline. The individual must maintain consistency without the routines that once supported it. This involves setting personal standards, determining how and when to review knowledge, and recognizing when additional effort is required. The responsibility for maintaining progress rests entirely with the individual. At the same time, the limits of formal education become more apparent. Situations arise that were not directly addressed during earlier stages of learning. The individual must respond to these situations using existing knowledge, adapting it to conditions that may not have been anticipated. This adaptation requires flexibility, as well as the ability to think beyond established patterns. Mistakes during this stage are often more complex. They may not be immediately visible, and their consequences may extend beyond a single moment. The individual must learn to recognize subtle errors, identifying their source through reflection rather than direct correction. This process reinforces the importance of awareness, encouraging a more deliberate approach to action. The relationship between knowledge and responsibility becomes more pronounced. The individual understands that the use of magic carries consequences that extend beyond personal experience. Decisions must be made with consideration for their broader impact, requiring judgment that goes beyond technical ability. This awareness shapes how knowledge is applied, introducing a layer of ethical consideration. Interaction with others continues to influence development. The individual may encounter different approaches to similar challenges. Observing how others apply their knowledge, these interactions provide opportunities for comparison, though not in the same way as earlier stages. The focus is less on measuring ability and more on understanding variation. Collaboration may occur in situations that require combined effort. The individual learns to work alongside others, integrating their own knowledge with that of their peers. This process requires communication and adaptability, as each participant brings a different perspective. Learning becomes a shared process, though it remains grounded in individual experience. Confidence during this stage is shaped by consistency over time. The individual begins to trust their ability to respond to familiar challenges, though uncertainty remains in new situations. This balance between confidence and caution supports a steady approach to learning, where effort continues even in the absence of certainty. The environment in which learning takes place continues to vary. There is no single setting that defines this stage, as experience is shaped by the demands of each situation. The individual must adapt to these changes while maintaining consistency in approach. This adaptability becomes an essential skill, supporting continued development. Reflection remains an important part of the process. The individual reviews actions and outcomes, identifying areas for improvement. This reflection is often internal, though it may be influenced by feedback from others. The ability to learn from experience becomes central, guiding future decisions. The concept of mastery continues to evolve. It is no longer associated with the completion of learning, but with the ability to apply knowledge effectively across different contexts. The individual recognizes that mastery is not fixed, but develops over time through repeated experience and adjustment. The influence of earlier education remains present, though it is less visible. The habits, routines, and patterns established during formal study continue to guide behavior, even in the absence of structure. These elements provide stability, supporting the individual as they navigate more complex situations. As this stage progresses, the individual becomes more aware of their own capabilities. Strengths and limitations are recognized more clearly, allowing for more deliberate application of effort. The individual learns to focus on areas that require improvement while maintaining consistency in areas of strength. The process of learning becomes continuous, without clear boundaries. There is no defined endpoint, only ongoing development shaped by experience. The individual moves forward, building upon what has already been learned while adapting to new challenges. Responsibility remains central, influencing how knowledge is used. The individual understands that decisions carry consequences, and that these consequences must be considered before action is taken. This awareness reinforces the importance of judgment, shaping how learning is applied. The transition from structured education to independent practice becomes more complete. The individual no longer relies on external systems to guide development, but on internalized understanding and experience. This shift marks a significant change in the nature of learning, though it remains connected to earlier stages. The path ahead continues to unfold without fixed direction. The individual may encounter new opportunities for development, each requiring adaptation and effort. Learning remains an active process, shaped by both choice and circumstance. This stage does not conclude the progression of education, but represents a continuation in a different form. The individual carries forward the knowledge, habits, and understanding developed over time, applying them in ways that extend beyond the limits of formal instruction. The process continues, guided by experience, shaped by reflection, and defined by the ability to adapt knowledge to an ever-changing environment. As experience continues to shape understanding, the presence of external structure begins to be replaced by internal regulation. What was once guided by rules enforced from outside is now maintained through personal discipline. The individual no longer requires constant reminders of how to act or when to prepare. These patterns have been absorbed over time, forming a stable approach to both learning and action. The use of magic becomes more deliberate. Earlier stages focused on learning how to produce results, but now the emphasis is on when and why those results should be produced. The individual begins to consider not only the effectiveness of an action, but its necessity. This consideration introduces restraint, shaping behavior in a way that reflects both knowledge and judgment. The presence of oversight remains, though it is less direct than before. Systems of regulation continue to exist, ensuring that magic is used within defined limits. The individual becomes more aware of these systems, not as restrictions imposed from outside, but as frameworks that support stability within the wider world. Understanding these limits becomes part of responsible practice. Legal boundaries play a role in this stage, though they are not always encountered directly. The individual learns that certain actions carry defined consequences, not because of their difficulty, but because of their potential impact. This awareness reinforces the importance of control, encouraging careful consideration before action is taken. The balance between ability and restraint becomes more significant. The individual may possess the skill to perform a wide range of actions, but must choose which are appropriate in each situation. This decision-making process requires more than technical knowledge. It involves an understanding of context, consequence, and responsibility. Mistakes during this stage are often linked to judgment rather than execution. The individual may perform an action correctly, but in a way that does not align with expectation or necessity. Recognizing these errors requires reflection, as they are not always immediately apparent. The individual learns to evaluate not only outcomes, but the reasoning behind them. The environment in which learning continues is shaped by practical experience. Each situation presents different conditions, requiring the individual to adapt knowledge accordingly. This variability reinforces the need for flexibility, as fixed patterns are not always sufficient. The individual must learn to respond to change while maintaining consistency in approach. Interaction with others continues to influence development. The individual observes how peers and more experienced practitioners approach similar situations, noting differences in method and outcome. These observations provide additional perspective, supporting continued refinement of personal approach. Collaboration may become more frequent, particularly in situations that require shared effort. The individual learns to coordinate actions with others, integrating different forms of knowledge to achieve a common goal. This process requires communication and awareness, as each participant contributes in a distinct way. Confidence during this stage is shaped by experience rather than assumption. The individual develops a sense of reliability in familiar contexts, though remains cautious in unfamiliar ones. This balance supports continued growth, allowing the individual to act with assurance while remaining open to adjustment. The relationship between knowledge and consequence becomes clearer. The individual understands that each action carries potential outcomes that extend beyond immediate effect. This awareness influences decision-making, encouraging a more measured approach to the use of magic. Reflection continues to play an important role. After each experience, the individual considers both what occurred and how it could be approached differently in the future. This process is often internal, though it may be supported by discussion with others. The ability to learn from experience remains central to ongoing development. The influence of earlier education remains evident in these processes. The structure, discipline, and patterns established during formal study continue to guide behavior, even as the context changes. The individual relies on these foundations when navigating more complex situations. The idea of mastery continues to develop, though it remains incomplete. The individual recognizes that there is always more to learn, and that understanding evolves through continued experience. Mastery is no longer viewed as a final state, but as an ongoing process of refinement. Time is managed independently, with the individual determining how to balance preparation, action, and reflection. This management requires awareness of both immediate responsibilities and longer-term development. The absence of fixed schedules allows for flexibility, but also requires discipline to maintain consistency. The presence of responsibility remains central. The individual understands that their actions contribute to a broader system, influencing outcomes that extend beyond personal experience. This understanding reinforces the importance of careful decision-making. As this stage progresses, the individual becomes more integrated into the wider world. The separation between learning and living continues to diminish, as knowledge is applied in ways that are both practical and necessary. The process of education becomes less visible, but no less significant. The path ahead remains open, shaped by both experience and choice. The individual continues to develop, guided by the understanding that learning does not end, but changes form. Each new situation provides an opportunity for growth, reinforcing the connection between knowledge and action. This stage represents a further step in the progression from structured education to independent practice. The individual carries forward the lessons of earlier stages, applying them in ways that reflect both ability and responsibility. The process continues, shaped by experience, guided by reflection, and defined by the ability to adapt knowledge to an ever-changing world. As experience continues to deepen, the individual begins to engage with knowledge in a way that extends beyond application alone. There is a gradual shift toward understanding how knowledge itself is formed, refined, and sometimes expanded. What was once learned as established fact is now examined more closely, revealing areas where explanation remains incomplete or open to interpretation. The process of questioning becomes more deliberate. The individual no longer accepts information solely as it was taught, but considers how and why it was developed in that form. This does not lead to rejection of earlier learning, but to a more detailed understanding of its limits. Some concepts remain stable, supported by consistent evidence, while others reveal variation depending on context. In certain areas, the individual may begin to explore patterns that were not emphasized during formal education. These patterns may emerge through repeated observation, suggesting connections that were not previously recognized. The act of noticing becomes an important part of development, as it allows the individual to move beyond structured learning into a form of inquiry that is less defined. This stage does not require formal research in all cases, but it introduces the possibility of it. The individual may begin to test ideas in controlled ways, observing how changes in approach affect outcome. These tests are often small in scale, but they reflect a shift in perspective. Learning is no longer only about applying what is known, but about examining how knowledge might be extended. The role of existing theory becomes more apparent. The individual recognizes that many aspects of magic are guided by principles that have been developed over time. These principles provide stability, but they are not always complete. There are areas where explanation remains limited, and the individual learns to operate within these limits while remaining open to further understanding. Mistakes during this stage are often linked to exploration rather than misapplication. The individual may attempt to adjust a known method, only to find that the result differs from expectation. These outcomes are not necessarily negative. They provide information, revealing how variations in approach influence results. The individual learns to interpret these outcomes, using them to refine understanding. The environment in which this exploration occurs may vary. Some individuals continue within structured roles, applying their knowledge in practical contexts while exploring ideas within limited conditions. Others may have access to spaces that allow for more focused inquiry, where experimentation can take place without immediate consequence. Regardless of the setting, the process remains consistent in its purpose. Interaction with others continues to influence this stage. The individual may engage in discussions that extend beyond immediate application, considering broader questions about how magic operates. These exchanges provide additional perspective, though they do not always lead to clear conclusions. The value lies in the process of consideration, rather than in immediate resolution. The balance between certainty and uncertainty becomes more evident. The individual understands that some knowledge is stable, while other areas remain open. This awareness encourages a cautious approach to new ideas, where exploration is balanced with respect for established understanding. Confidence during this stage is shaped by both knowledge and awareness of limitation. The individual may feel capable within familiar areas, but recognizes that exploration introduces variables that are not fully controlled. This balance supports a steady approach, where progress is made without unnecessary risk. The concept of innovation begins to take on a clearer meaning. It is not defined by sudden discovery, but by gradual adjustment and refinement. The individual learns that new understanding often emerges through small changes, repeated over time. This process requires patience, as results are not always immediate. Reflection remains central to development. The individual considers not only what was done, but how it relates to broader patterns of understanding. This reflection supports a deeper engagement with knowledge, allowing the individual to connect experience with theory in a more cohesive way. The influence of earlier education continues to be present, though it is now applied in a different context. The structure, discipline, and methods of learning developed during formal study provide a foundation for exploration. The individual relies on these elements when engaging with more complex ideas. The role of responsibility remains unchanged, even as the nature of learning evolves. The individual must consider the potential consequences of exploration, ensuring that new approaches do not lead to unintended outcomes. This awareness reinforces the importance of restraint, even in the pursuit of understanding. As this stage progresses, the individual becomes more comfortable with uncertainty. The need for immediate answers diminishes, replaced by an acceptance that some questions require extended consideration. This shift supports a more measured approach to learning, where progress is defined by understanding rather than conclusion. The process of knowledge development becomes continuous, without clear boundaries. The individual moves between application, reflection, and exploration, integrating these elements into a cohesive approach. Learning is no longer separated into stages, but experienced as an ongoing process. The path ahead remains open, shaped by both curiosity and discipline. The individual continues to engage with knowledge in ways that reflect both established understanding and the possibility of further development. Each experience contributes to a broader perspective, reinforcing the connection between what is known and what remains to be explored. This stage represents a further extension of education beyond its formal structure. The individual carries forward the principles learned earlier, applying them in ways that allow for continued growth. The process remains steady, guided by observation, shaped by reflection, and defined by the ability to engage with knowledge at a deeper level. As knowledge deepens through continued experience and reflection, there is a growing awareness that not all aspects of magic can be fully understood or controlled. What was once approached with the expectation of eventual clarity now reveals areas where explanation remains incomplete. This realization does not interrupt the process of learning, but it changes how that process is viewed. The individual begins to recognize that certain outcomes cannot always be predicted with complete accuracy. Even with careful preparation and consistent method, results may vary depending on conditions that are not entirely visible. These variations are not treated as failures, but as indications that knowledge has limits. The individual learns to work within those limits rather than attempt to remove them entirely. Historical understanding becomes more relevant at this stage. The individual may encounter accounts of past attempts to expand knowledge beyond established boundaries. Some of these efforts led to new understanding, while others resulted in outcomes that were difficult to manage. These examples are not presented as warnings in a direct sense, but they provide context for the risks involved in extending knowledge too far without sufficient control. The concept of caution becomes more central. The individual learns to approach unfamiliar situations with measured attention, recognizing that not all variables can be accounted for in advance. This caution does not prevent exploration, but it shapes how exploration is conducted. Each step is considered carefully, with awareness of both potential benefit and possible consequence. Mistakes during this stage often reveal the boundaries of understanding rather than errors in execution. The individual may apply a method correctly, yet encounter an outcome that differs from expectation. These moments highlight the difference between known principles and areas that remain uncertain. The individual learns to interpret these outcomes, using them to refine their sense of where knowledge applies and where it does not. The environment in which learning continues may present situations that challenge established patterns. The individual must adapt to these challenges, applying knowledge in ways that reflect both understanding and limitation. This adaptation requires flexibility, as well as the ability to recognize when a situation extends beyond familiar conditions. Interaction with others provides additional perspective on these limits. The individual may observe how different practitioners respond to similar challenges, noting variations in approach. Some may rely strictly on established methods, while others may attempt to adjust those methods in response to new conditions. These observations contribute to a broader understanding of how knowledge is applied in practice. The balance between confidence and caution becomes more refined. The individual learns to trust their ability within known boundaries, while remaining attentive to areas where uncertainty exists. This balance supports a steady approach to learning, where progress continues without unnecessary risk. The role of theory continues to evolve. The individual understands that theoretical frameworks provide guidance, but are not always complete representations of reality. This awareness encourages a more flexible approach to theory, where it is used as a tool rather than a fixed explanation. Reflection remains an essential part of development. The individual considers not only the outcomes of their actions, but the conditions under which those outcomes occurred. This process supports a deeper understanding of how knowledge interacts with context, reinforcing the importance of awareness in all aspects of practice. The influence of earlier education remains evident in these processes. The discipline, structure, and methods of learning developed during formal study provide a stable foundation for navigating uncertainty. The individual relies on these elements when encountering situations that extend beyond familiar patterns. Responsibility continues to shape how knowledge is used. The individual recognizes that acting beyond established understanding carries potential consequences that must be considered carefully. This awareness reinforces the importance of restraint, ensuring that exploration remains aligned with broader expectations. The concept of mastery becomes more nuanced. It is no longer associated with complete control or total understanding, but with the ability to operate effectively within both known and unknown conditions. The individual learns that mastery includes recognizing limitations, as well as applying knowledge. Time continues to be managed independently, though the focus may shift depending on circumstance. The individual balances periods of action with periods of reflection, ensuring that experience contributes to ongoing development. This balance supports a steady progression without reliance on external structure. As this stage progresses, the individual becomes more comfortable with the presence of uncertainty. The expectation of complete understanding gives way to an acceptance that some aspects of magic will remain beyond full explanation. This acceptance does not limit growth, but it shapes how growth is approached. The path ahead remains open, defined by both knowledge and its limits. The individual continues to engage with learning in a way that reflects both curiosity and caution. Each experience contributes to a broader perspective, reinforcing the idea that education is not a process that reaches completion, but one that continues through adaptation and awareness. This stage represents a further refinement of understanding, where knowledge is balanced with recognition of its boundaries. The individual carries forward what has been learned, applying it in ways that respect both its strengths and its limitations. The process continues, guided by experience, shaped by reflection, and defined by the ability to navigate both certainty and uncertainty with care. As experience continues to accumulate, the direction of learning begins to shift from personal development toward the sharing of knowledge with others. This transition does not occur suddenly, but develops through repeated situations where the individual is required to explain, demonstrate, or guide. What was once internal becomes external, shaped into a form that can be understood beyond the self. The act of explaining introduces a new perspective on knowledge. The individual must consider not only what is known, but how it can be communicated clearly. This requires an awareness of structure, as well as the ability to simplify without losing accuracy. Concepts that were once understood through experience must now be expressed in a way that allows others to follow the same process. Teaching, in its early form, may occur informally. The individual may assist others in understanding a task, offering guidance based on personal experience. These interactions are often brief, but they reveal the complexity of transferring knowledge. The individual learns that understanding something personally does not always mean it can be easily explained. The process of demonstration becomes important during this stage. By showing rather than describing, the individual allows others to observe how knowledge is applied in practice. This method reflects earlier stages of learning, where observation played a central role. The individual begins to recognize the value of this approach, integrating it into their own method of instruction. At the same time, the limitations of teaching become apparent. Not all individuals learn in the same way, and not all methods of explanation produce the same result. The individual must adapt, adjusting their approach based on the response of others. This flexibility requires awareness, as well as the ability to recognize when a method is not effective. The presence of structure returns in a different form. While earlier education was defined by external systems, teaching requires the individual to create structure within explanation. Lessons must be organized, concepts presented in sequence, and complexity introduced gradually. The individual learns to design this structure, drawing upon their own experience of how learning progressed. Responsibility takes on a new dimension during this stage. The individual is no longer responsible only for their own understanding, but for the accuracy of what is passed on to others. This responsibility encourages careful consideration, ensuring that information is presented correctly and without unnecessary variation. Mistakes in teaching carry a different form of consequence. An error in explanation may lead to misunderstanding, which can persist beyond the initial interaction. The individual learns to recognize these situations, correcting them when possible and adjusting future explanations to prevent repetition. The environment in which teaching occurs may vary. It may take place within formal settings, where roles are clearly defined, or in informal contexts, where guidance emerges naturally through interaction. In both cases, the process remains consistent in its purpose, focused on transferring knowledge in a way that can be applied by others. Interaction with learners provides new insight into the nature of knowledge. The individual observes how others respond to instruction, noting where understanding develops easily and where it requires additional effort. These observations contribute to a deeper awareness of how learning occurs, reinforcing the connection between explanation and comprehension. The balance between knowledge and communication becomes central. The individual must maintain accuracy while ensuring that explanation remains accessible. This balance requires attention to detail, as well as an understanding of the needs of those receiving instruction. Confidence during this stage is shaped not only by personal ability, but by the ability to guide others effectively. Successful teaching reinforces understanding, while difficulty in explanation highlights areas that may require further reflection. The individual learns that teaching is both a demonstration of knowledge and a means of refining it. Reflection continues to play an important role. After each interaction, the individual considers how effectively knowledge was communicated, identifying areas for improvement. This process supports ongoing development, ensuring that teaching becomes more consistent over time. The influence of earlier education remains evident in the methods used. The individual draws upon the structure, discipline, and patterns experienced during formal study, adapting them to new contexts. These elements provide a foundation for teaching, even as the role itself differs from that of a learner. The concept of mastery continues to evolve. It is no longer defined solely by personal ability, but by the capacity to support the development of others. The individual recognizes that true understanding includes the ability to guide, not just to perform. Time is managed with consideration for both personal tasks and the needs of others. The individual balances responsibilities, ensuring that teaching does not interrupt continued learning, but becomes part of it. This integration supports a steady progression where both roles contribute to development. As this stage progresses, the individual becomes more comfortable with the role of guiding others. The initial uncertainty gives way to a more stable approach, where explanation and demonstration are applied with increasing consistency. The process of teaching becomes a natural extension of learning, rather than a separate activity. The path ahead continues to expand, shaped by both experience and interaction. Each interaction contributes to a broader understanding, reinforcing the connection between learning and teaching. This stage represents a continuation of education in a form that extends beyond individual development. The individual carries forward the knowledge acquired over time, shaping it into a form that can be shared. The process continues, guided by experience, supported by reflection, and defined by the ability to translate understanding into a form that others can follow. As the role of guiding others becomes more established, the individual begins to understand that knowledge does not remain fixed once it is shared. It changes in subtle ways, shaped by interpretation, repetition, and context. What was once learned through direct experience is now passed through different perspectives, each adding variation to its form. The individual becomes aware that maintaining clarity requires ongoing attention. The process of teaching becomes more structured over time. Informal explanation gives way to more deliberate organization, where ideas are arranged in a sequence that reflects how understanding develops. The individual begins to recognize patterns in how others learn, adjusting the pace and depth of instruction accordingly. This structure does not remove flexibility, but it provides a framework that supports consistency. Institutions continue to play a role in this stage, though the individual may engage with them in a different capacity. Formal systems of education remain present, maintaining continuity across generations. The individual contributes to this continuity, either directly or indirectly, by reinforcing established methods of learning. These systems provide stability, ensuring that knowledge is preserved in a recognizable form. At the same time, variation between institutions becomes more visible. Different approaches to teaching reflect differences in tradition, culture, and emphasis. Some prioritize strict structure, while others allow for more flexibility in interpretation. The individual observes these differences, understanding that knowledge can be transmitted in multiple ways without losing its core principles. The presence of cultural influence becomes more apparent. Knowledge is not only shaped by its content, but by the context in which it is taught. Traditions, values, and expectations influence how information is presented and received. The individual learns to recognize these influences, adapting teaching methods to align with different contexts when necessary. Responsibility continues to expand in this role. The individual is now part of a system that extends beyond personal experience, contributing to the development of others in a more sustained way. This responsibility requires careful attention to accuracy, as well as awareness of how information may be interpreted. The individual learns to consider not only what is being taught, but how it will be understood over time. Mistakes in transmission become more significant at this stage. An error that is repeated may become part of a larger pattern, influencing understanding beyond the initial interaction. The individual learns to monitor for these patterns, correcting them when they appear, and refining methods to reduce their occurrence. This process reinforces the importance of precision in communication. The relationship between teacher and learner continues to evolve. The individual begins to see that learning is not a one-directional process, but an exchange. Questions, responses, and variations in understanding contribute to a dynamic interaction that shapes both participants. The individual remains open to these exchanges, recognizing their value in refining knowledge. The environment in which teaching occurs may shift depending on circumstance. It may involve formal settings with defined roles, or more fluid contexts where guidance is provided as needed. In each case, the individual adapts to the conditions, maintaining consistency in approach while adjusting to the needs of the situation. The balance between tradition and adaptation becomes more important. The individual must preserve established knowledge while allowing for the possibility of change. This balance requires careful judgment, ensuring that new approaches do not compromise foundational principles. The individual learns to navigate this balance, maintaining continuity while supporting development. Confidence during this stage is shaped by both experience and responsibility. The individual becomes more assured in their ability to guide others, though remains aware of the limits of their own understanding. This awareness supports a measured approach, where teaching is conducted with both clarity and caution. Reflection continues to guide development. The individual reviews teaching methods, considering how effectively knowledge is being transmitted. This reflection may involve observing outcomes over time, noting how learners apply what has been taught. The ability to adapt based on these observations becomes an essential part of the process. The influence of earlier stages remains evident in the methods used. The individual draws upon personal experience as a learner, recalling what was effective and what required adjustment. These memories inform current practice, creating a connection between past and present stages of education. The concept of mastery continues to expand. It now includes not only the ability to apply knowledge and guide others, but the ability to maintain consistency across different contexts. The individual recognizes that mastery involves stability as well as flexibility, ensuring that knowledge remains reliable even as it is adapted. Time is managed with attention to both teaching and continued learning. The individual remains engaged with new developments, ensuring that knowledge does not become static. This ongoing engagement supports the ability to provide accurate and relevant guidance, reinforcing the connection between learning and teaching. As this stage progresses, the individual becomes more integrated into the broader system of knowledge transmission. Their role contributes to the continuity of learning across generations, ensuring that knowledge is preserved while remaining adaptable. This integration reflects a deeper level of engagement with the process of education. The path ahead continues to evolve, shaped by both experience and responsibility. The individual remains part of a system that extends beyond personal development, contributing to a larger framework of learning. Each interaction reinforces the connection between knowledge, communication, and continuity. This stage represents a further extension of education beyond individual experience. The individual carries forward the responsibility of maintaining and transmitting knowledge, ensuring that it remains accessible and accurate. The process continues, guided by reflection, shaped by adaptation, and defined by the ability to sustain learning across time and context. As the role within the wider system becomes more established, learning begins to take on a form that is less visible, but no less continuous. The individual is no longer defined by stages of instruction or formal progression. Yet the process of development remains present. It continues through adaptation, shaped by changes in environment, responsibility, and the passage of time. The idea of lifelong learning becomes more apparent during this stage. Knowledge is not treated as something that was completed during earlier years, but as something that must be maintained and refined. The individual encounters new situations that require adjustment, drawing upon existing understanding while extending it to meet unfamiliar conditions. This extension is gradual, guided by experience rather than structured instruction. Changes within the wider world influence this process. New developments, variations in practice, and shifts in expectation require the individual to remain attentive. What was once sufficient may no longer apply in the same way, and the individual must adapt without abandoning the principles that support stability. This balance between continuity and change defines the nature of learning at this level. The process of adaptation often occurs without formal recognition. The individual may adjust methods in response to subtle differences in context, refining approach through repeated experience. These adjustments are not always deliberate, but they contribute to a gradual evolution of understanding. Over time, the individual becomes more flexible, capable of responding to a wider range of situations. Reflection remains an essential part of this process. The individual considers how previous knowledge applies to current conditions, identifying where adjustments are necessary. This reflection supports continued growth, ensuring that learning does not remain fixed. It also reinforces the connection between experience and understanding, allowing the individual to integrate new information without losing coherence. Interaction with others continues to provide opportunities for learning. The individual observes how peers respond to similar challenges, noting variations in approach. These observations contribute to a broader perspective, supporting the development of methods that are both effective and adaptable. Learning becomes a shared process. Even in the absence of formal structure, the balance between confidence and caution continues to evolve. The individual may feel assured in familiar contexts, yet remains aware that change can introduce new variables. This awareness encourages a steady approach where decisions are made with consideration rather than assumption. The individual learns to rely on experience while remaining open to adjustment. The influence of earlier education remains present, though it is now integrated into daily practice. The structure, discipline, and patterns established during formal study continue to guide behavior, even as the context changes. These elements provide stability, allowing the individual to adapt without losing consistency. The concept of mastery becomes more closely associated with adaptability. It is no longer defined by the ability to perform within fixed conditions, but by the ability to respond effectively to change. The individual recognizes that mastery involves ongoing development, shaped by both knowledge and experience. Time is managed independently, with the individual determining how to balance action, reflection, and continued learning. There are no fixed schedules, but the need for consistency remains. The individual must maintain engagement with knowledge, ensuring that it continues to develop rather than remain static. Responsibility continues to influence how learning is approached. The individual understands that decisions carry consequences, and that these consequences may extend beyond immediate outcomes. This awareness reinforces the importance of careful consideration, shaping how knowledge is applied in practice. The environment in which learning occurs may change over time, requiring further adaptation. The individual must adjust to these changes while maintaining a consistent approach to knowledge. This process supports continued development, ensuring that learning remains relevant despite variation in context. As this stage progresses, the individual becomes more comfortable with the absence of formal structure. Learning is no longer defined by external systems, but by internal awareness and experience. This shift reflects a deeper level of independence, where development is guided by personal engagement rather than imposed expectation. The path ahead remains open, shaped by both experience and choice. The individual continues to encounter new situations, each contributing to a broader understanding. Learning remains active, though it is no longer separated into distinct stages. The connection between past and present becomes more apparent. The individual recognizes that earlier stages of education continue to influence current practice, providing a foundation for ongoing development. This continuity reinforces the value of structured learning, even as the context changes. The process of adaptation does not remove the need for stability. The individual must maintain consistency in approach while adjusting to new conditions. This balance supports effective learning. allowing knowledge to evolve without becoming fragmented. As the stage continues, the individual becomes more integrated into a system that extends beyond formal education. They contribute to the continuity of knowledge through both application and interaction, reinforcing the connection between learning and practice. This stage represents the continuation of education in its most extended form. The individual carries forward the knowledge and habits developed over time, applying them in ways that reflect both experience and awareness. The process remains ongoing, guided by reflection, shaped by adaptation, and defined by the ability to respond to change while maintaining coherence in understanding. As time continues, the relationship between knowledge and experience begins to change in a subtle way. The individual no longer focuses on acquiring new information at the same pace as before. Instead, there is a gradual shift toward refining what is already known. The process becomes less about expansion and more about clarity, where understanding is adjusted and simplified through repeated use. Patterns that once required attention begin to feel more natural. Actions are performed with less conscious effort, guided by familiarity rather than deliberate thought. This shift does not reduce the importance of knowledge, but changes how it is accessed. The individual relies more on memory shaped by experience, allowing responses to occur with greater efficiency. At the same time, the pace of change slows. New developments may still occur, but they are encountered less frequently and often require more effort to integrate. The individual becomes selective in how new information is approached, focusing on what aligns with existing understanding. This selectivity is not a limitation, but a reflection of how knowledge stabilizes over time. The balance between ability and effort becomes more defined. Tasks that were once difficult may now be performed with consistency, requiring less preparation. However, this consistency depends on continued engagement. Without practice, even familiar actions may lose precision. The individual learns to maintain a level of activity that supports stability, even as the need for constant learning decreases. Reflection takes on a quieter role during this stage. The individual no longer analyzes every action in detail, but considers broader patterns over time. This form of reflection is less immediate, focusing on how understanding has changed rather than on individual outcomes. It supports a sense of continuity, allowing the individual to recognize development across longer periods. The influence of earlier stages remains present, though it is less visible. The structure, discipline, and methods of learning continue to shape behavior, even as they are no longer actively considered. These elements have become part of routine, guiding actions without requiring attention. Interaction with others continues, though it may occur less frequently or in different forms. The individual may still share knowledge, but often in ways that are more selective. Guidance is provided when needed, rather than as a constant activity. This change reflects a shift in focus, where personal practice becomes more central. The concept of mastery becomes more closely associated with consistency rather than growth. The individual recognizes that maintaining a stable level of ability requires ongoing effort, even if that effort is less visible. Mastery is not viewed as a final achievement, but as a state that must be sustained. Limitations also become more apparent during this stage. The individual may notice changes in how quickly new information is absorbed or how easily certain tasks are performed. These changes are gradual, and they do not prevent continued engagement, but they influence how effort is applied. The individual learns to adapt, focusing on areas where consistency can be maintained. The role of memory becomes more significant. Knowledge that has been used repeatedly remains accessible, while less frequently used information may require additional effort to recall. This process shapes how the individual approaches learning, reinforcing the importance of regular engagement with essential skills. The environment continues to influence experience, though it may feel more stable than before. Familiar settings and routines provide a sense of continuity, allowing the individual to operate with less adjustment. Changes in environment may still occur, but they are approached with the benefit of experience, reducing their impact. Responsibility remains present, though it may take on different forms. The individual continues to consider the consequences of their actions, applying knowledge with care. This awareness supports a steady approach, where decisions are made with consideration rather than urgency. Time is experienced differently during this stage. Without the structure of formal education or early development, it becomes more fluid. The individual determines how to balance activity and rest, ensuring that engagement remains consistent without becoming overwhelming. The connection between knowledge and identity becomes more stable. The individual no longer questions their place within the system, but operates within it with a sense of familiarity. This stability supports continued engagement, allowing learning to remain part of daily life without requiring constant adjustment. As this stage progresses, the individual becomes more focused on maintaining what has been achieved. The emphasis shifts away from rapid development and towards steady application. This shift reflects a natural progression where knowledge is preserved and refined rather than continually expanded. The path ahead remains open, though it is approached with a different perspective. The individual continues to engage with learning, but in a way that reflects both experience and limitation. Each action contributes to a broader pattern of consistency, reinforcing the connection between knowledge and practice. This stage represents a form of refinement that follows extended development. The individual carries forward the knowledge acquired over time, applying it with stability and care. The process continues, guided by experience, shaped by reflection, and defined by the ability to maintain understanding within a changing context. As time continues, the focus of learning begins to shift further away from active refinement and toward preservation. The individual, having spent years developing and applying knowledge, now engages with it in a way that emphasizes continuity. What has been learned is no longer expanded in the same way, but maintained, recalled, and passed forward in forms that can remain stable over time. Memory becomes central to this stage. Knowledge that was once practiced regularly may now be used less often, yet it remains present, shaped by years of repetition. The individual relies on this memory not only to perform tasks, but to retain a sense of connection to earlier stages of learning. What was once immediate becomes reflective, accessed when needed, rather than continuously applied. The pace of engagement continues to slow, though it does not disappear. The individual may still apply knowledge in familiar contexts, maintaining consistency through occasional use. These actions are not driven by necessity alone, but by the understanding that continued engagement supports preservation. Without use, knowledge may become less precise, and the individual learns to maintain a balance between activity and rest. The role of guidance returns in a quieter form. The individual may offer insight to others, not through structured teaching, but through shared experience. These moments are less frequent, but they carry a different kind of weight. The knowledge being shared is no longer part of a developing process, but part of an established understanding that has been shaped over time. The environment in which this stage occurs often reflects stability. Familiar settings and routines support a sense of continuity, allowing the individual to remain connected to what has been learned. Changes may still occur, but they are approached with a level of acceptance that reflects experience. The individual adapts when necessary, though the emphasis remains on maintaining what is already known. Reflection becomes broader in scope. The individual considers not only specific actions, but the progression of learning as a whole. There is an awareness of how knowledge has developed over time and how it has been applied in different contexts. This reflection is not focused on immediate improvement, but on understanding the overall path that has been followed. The concept of mastery becomes less about performance and more about retention. The individual recognizes that knowledge, once fully developed, must be preserved to remain meaningful. This preservation requires attention, even if that attention is less frequent than before. The individual learns to maintain familiarity with essential skills, ensuring that they remain accessible. Limitations become more visible during this stage, though they are not always restrictive. The individual may notice changes in how quickly information is recalled or how easily certain tasks are performed. These changes are gradual, and they are approached with adjustment rather than resistance. Interaction with others continues, though it may take on a different character. Conversations may focus on shared experience, reflecting on knowledge that has been developed over time. These exchanges reinforce the continuity of learning, connecting individual experience with the broader system. The influence of earlier education remains present, though it is now fully integrated into the individual's approach. The structure, discipline, and patterns of learning have become part of routine, guiding actions without requiring conscious effort. These elements provide stability, supporting the preservation of knowledge. Responsibility remains, though it is expressed in a more measured way. The individual continues to consider the impact of their actions, applying knowledge with care. This awareness supports a steady approach, where decisions are made with consideration for both present and future outcomes. Time is experienced with greater continuity. Without the structured progression of earlier stages, it becomes less segmented. The individual determines how to engage with knowledge, balancing periods of activity with periods of rest. This balance supports ongoing connection without requiring constant effort. The path ahead is no longer defined by stages of learning, but by continuity. The individual remains engaged with knowledge in a way that reflects both experience and awareness of limitation. Learning does not end, but it becomes less visible, integrated into daily life rather than separated from it. As this stage continues, there is a growing sense of completion, though it is not final. The individual recognizes that the process of learning has reached a point where active development is no longer the primary focus. Instead, the emphasis is on maintaining what has been achieved and ensuring that it remains accessible. The connection between knowledge and identity becomes more stable. The individual no longer defines themselves by what they are learning, but by what they have learned. This stability supports a sense of continuity, allowing knowledge to remain a consistent part of experience. The process of preservation does not remove the possibility of change. The individual remains capable of adapting to new situations, though the emphasis is on applying existing knowledge rather than acquiring new forms. This balance reflects a mature stage of learning, where stability and adaptability coexist. This stage represents the continuation of education in its most reflective form. The individual carries forward the knowledge developed over time, maintaining it with care and applying it when needed. The process remains ongoing, though it is less defined by progression and more by continuity, guided by experience and shaped by the passage of time. As the progression reaches its later point, the role of knowledge becomes less active and more enduring. What was once developed through effort and repetition now exists as part of a longer continuity. The individual no longer engages with learning as a process that moves forward in defined stages, but as something that remains present even when not directly applied. The influence of earlier learning continues to shape behavior, though it is no longer examined in detail. Decisions are made with a sense of familiarity, guided by patterns that have been reinforced over time. These patterns do not require constant attention, yet they remain reliable, supporting consistent action without deliberate effort. There is a gradual shift toward considering how knowledge extends beyond the individual. The individual becomes more aware of the broader system in which they exist, recognizing that what has been learned contributes to something larger. This awareness is not always expressed directly, but it influences how knowledge is valued and maintained. The concept of legacy begins to take form in a quiet and steady way. The individual understands that knowledge does not remain solely within one person, but continues through those who have learned from it. Whether through direct teaching or simple demonstration, what has been developed over time becomes part of a larger chain of understanding. The process of passing knowledge forward may occur in small, unstructured ways. A single explanation, a brief correction, or a moment of guidance can carry significance beyond its immediate context. The individual recognizes that these moments contribute to continuity, even if they are not part of a formal system. At the same time, the individual becomes more selective in how knowledge is shared. There is an understanding that not all information needs to be repeated, and that clarity is more valuable than quantity. This selectivity reflects a refined approach where communication is shaped by both experience and awareness. The environment continues to provide a sense of stability, though it may change gradually over time. The individual adapts to these changes with less effort than before, relying on established patterns of understanding. This adaptability supports continuity, allowing knowledge to remain relevant despite variation in context. Reflection at this stage is broader and less immediate. The individual considers the progression of learning as a whole, recognizing how earlier stages contributed to current understanding. This reflection is not focused on improvement, but on awareness of continuity and connection. The concept of mastery becomes less defined by action and more by presence. Instead, mastery exists as a stable condition, supported by years of experience and consistent application. Limitations are acknowledged with greater clarity. The individual understands that not all knowledge can be maintained indefinitely, and that some aspects may fade over time. This awareness does not create urgency, but encourages careful attention to what remains most important. Interaction with others continues, though it may occur less frequently. When it does occur, it often reflects a sharing of experience rather than instruction. These exchanges contribute to the ongoing continuity of knowledge, reinforcing its place within a broader system. The passage of time becomes more noticeable, though it does not interrupt the process of learning. Instead, it shapes how knowledge is experienced, moving from active engagement to a more reflective state. The individual adapts to this change, maintaining connection without the need for constant application. Responsibility remains present, though it is expressed in a quieter form. The individual continues to consider the impact of their actions, applying knowledge with care when it is used. This awareness supports stability, ensuring that knowledge is preserved without unnecessary variation. The connection between knowledge and identity becomes fully integrated. The individual no longer separates what they know from who they are. This integration supports a sense of continuity, allowing learning to remain part of experience without requiring active effort. As this stage continues, there is a gradual sense of completion, though it is not final. The process of learning does not end, but it reaches a point where change occurs more slowly. The individual remains connected to knowledge, even as its application becomes less frequent. The broader system of education continues beyond the individual, carried forward by others who move through the same stages. The individual becomes part of this continuity, contributing in ways that may not always be visible. This contribution reinforces the idea that learning extends beyond any single person. The path that began with instinct and uncertainty has reached a point of stability. Each stage has contributed to a progression that is no longer defined by movement, but by presence. The individual carries forward what has been learned, maintaining it as part of a larger whole. This final stage reflects the enduring nature of education within the wizarding world. It is not a conclusion, but a continuation in a quieter form. Knowledge remains, shaped by time, preserved through experience, and carried forward through those who follow the same path. And so, the path of education, which began without structure or awareness, settles into something quieter and more continuous. What once appeared in brief, uncontrolled moments gradually became shaped by guidance, refined through discipline, and tested through expectation. Each stage did not replace the last, but added to it, forming a progression that moves from instinct to understanding and from understanding to responsibility. Over time, learning shifts from something directed by others to something carried within. The structure fades, but the patterns remain. Knowledge is no longer something to be acquired, but something to be maintained, adjusted, and passed forward in small and steady ways. What was taught in classrooms and practiced in careful repetition becomes part of how the world is understood and approached. There is no clear end to this process. It does not conclude with completion, but continues through experience, reflection, and quiet application. What remains is not only what was learned, but how it was shaped over time and how it continues to influence what comes next.